deliver to you. I was lucky to get some. Okay, we are now live streaming on YouTube.
Not quite just yet.
Not yet, not okay. I lied. It said so up in the corner.
We're live now.
Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and council and staff. Welcome to this evening's special session of council for May 19th, 2020. This is an electronic meeting, which is available at the town's YouTube channel. I'll just go over a few things before we start the meeting. This electronic meeting agenda is available on the town's website at greaternapanee.com and is being streamed to the public on the town's YouTube channel. The Municipal Conflict of Interest Act, Council's Rules of Procedure bylaw, and Code of Conduct and other pertinent legislation apply to these electronic meetings as if they were held in person. The mayor will call the roll of members of council as well as a statement of the members of town staff who are participating. If any member of council's connection to the meeting is interrupted, then the mayor will call for a recess of the meeting until the member can reconnect either by internet or telephone. If the member is not able to reconnect within 5 minutes, then the meeting will resume. Also included in this, which we're going to deal with when we start the meeting, is the mayor will call for questions using recorded votes. So I will call the meeting to order, but before we get started, there are a few things that I would like to say. I don't think that there's anyone out there that won't join us in extending sympathy to the family of Captain Jennifer Casey from the Canadian Snowbirds. Hard to imagine that she flew over our municipality and our county a short 7 days ago, and she's no longer with us. So I'm sure that you all join us in almost saying how much more can this country take, but it was such a good thing that they did, but such a terrible thing that happened to the young lady. Also, I want to thank our emergency services, the OPP, and I know that Loyalist Township was in on this. Not a very nice way for them to start their holiday Monday with recovering a body from our Napanee River, and our sympathy goes out to the family. Last one is, this is Public Works Week, and I don't think that we could let this go by without saying to our Public Works team, which includes a lot of people in our municipality, and they've certainly proven their worth in these pandemic times as well. So a shout out for all that they do. There are so many small things that get done with and without asking. They're certainly a very important part of our team, as is every part, but I don't think I can let tonight go by without acknowledging everything that they do for us. And with that, I will call the meeting to order. I need a motion for the adoption of the agenda, please. Moved by, Deputy Mayor Kaiser, seconded by, I saw a hand over here, was it Councillor Richardson? I'm going to back up a little bit. Sorry, I do need to see if we can get a mover and a seconder to waive the procedural bylaw of having recorded votes, and we will go back to just a show of hands. So can I have a Councillor McCormack, Councillor Norrie, all in favor of that motion by a show of hands? So done. Now we'll move for an adoption, carried unanimously. I will move for an adoption of the agenda, please. Deputy Mayor Kaiser, Councillor Norrie, all in favor of that motion? Motion is carried. Thank you. And disclosure of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof. Seeing none, I need a motion for the adoption of the minutes for the special session of council April 30th. You have a recommendation before you to receive and approve. Moved by Councillor Johnson, seconded by Councillor Pennell. All in favor of that motion? Motion is carried unanimously. Items for discussion. 5.1, we have CAO emergency response duties and pandemic service response. You have had a chart, and I'm going to speak to the first two sections on it, and then I'll have the CAO come in and we'll go through this together. I don't think when we went into this emergency that we overthought that it would go into this length of time. And I realize that it has been confusing for council and certainly confusing for the public. Thank goodness not confusing for the team, the MECG and the EOC, both at county and town. But you will see in there the emergency response duties and the pandemic service response of each and every section within. Mine, of course, has been sitting as the liaison to collect information, and I've tried to make sure that I touch base at least once a week with each and every one of the council members, not just to take information to them, but also take valuable information back to the EOC, because we will certainly, we certainly gather a lot through that. I act as chair, of course, and show leadership on the implementation of council approved policies. With staff, we, advise the mayor on the declaration of emergency, draft emergency communications, and provide support and recommendations. I'm not going to read it to you verbatim, but you will also see that we've got the duties that are there for council as well. We have been very lucky that we've been able to draw the council together as often as we can to keep the flow of information going. I get lots of calls from people saying that they have been in touch with their council member and been happy with what they're able to get answers for, as long as we're doing what they want us to. If we didn't have this sort of chart to go by, we would be in trouble, because we may be slipping back into these things. Lockdown is what we're in now, almost into level 1 strict. But I think that if any of you were out and about today, you could see that the floodgates opened. The stores were extremely busy, that there were all kinds of cars out and around, and to have a chart like this and have everybody's duties right from top to bottom, and by bottom I don't mean bottom, but you can see that there's always a going forward and a slipping back. Of course, I'll let Ray take over with the CAO and expand, but before that, council, with any of this out for myself and your duties, do you have any questions thus far? Yeah, Councillor Norrie?
Thank you. I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I see we have duties. That's great. I'm glad we can get involved. Are we now going to be involved in the meetings directly when they have the EOC meetings?
At this point, I wouldn't think instill lockdown, Bob, and I certainly understand that you would like to come into them. And is it just to hear things firsthand? Is that what you're wanting? Is that your concern?
Well, no, now have jobs to do. We should participate. No more of, we don't know what's going on. No disrespect. I know you call us, but I've not seen minutes or anything. So we don't know what's going on.
You're not getting the incident reports out every time, every week?
No. I've seen little things, but not. Anyways, I'll let my vote speak.
No, I understand it, and certainly it can be discussed. But I mean, we're all getting the incident reports out from the MECG and from the EOC. Deputy Mayor Kaiser, did you have your hand up to say something? Sorry.
I did, Your Worship. Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
So the MECG is really an operational committee. And I think it's important for everybody to understand that it was implemented as part of the Emergency Act, and its purpose is to maintain operations within that emergency declaration. So it's not a policy making and direction setting body like this council is. It's an operational committee, and how the town is conducting business on their day-to-day operations from within that group. And so it's not parallel to what we do. Having said that, we did talk a lot at that group about council as a whole, all 7 of us, and being involved. And that's why we're beginning to move back into a more normal schedule for meetings. Tonight is the first one. We'll have 2 in June, and we're going to try to get back to more an approaching normal schedule that we can be more involved and more in communication and all the rest of it as things go forward. And I just want to jump in and put that out there, Your Worship, to help put that in perspective. So you got to think of the MECG as an operational group for the day-to-day operations. And so it's a very different functionality than what we do here.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Did you have your hand up, Councillor Richardson? Yep.
Yeah, I did, Your Worship, and I don't know whether I should wait till after Ray does his presentation or not, but I'm just looking through the report, and I don't know if it's an oversight, but when I can give you the page number if it's any help. It's the third page in. It says level 2, and about 3/4 of the way down, it says late stages of level 2, the mayor may consider lifting the emergency declaration depending on the capacity of the hospital, inventory levels of PPE, and so it's the last sentence in that paragraph. I'm wondering, was it just an oversight? It says the mayor, or to the deputy's point, and really to Councillor Norrie's point, should it say the mayor and council? I think it's important that the mayor and council got us into this emergency service, or the emergency management position, and I think it would be important that the mayor and council would be involved in the lifting of the emergency declaration. So I don't know if that was just a misprint or an oversight, or if it would maybe it was designed to be that way. I'm not sure. So I guess I can ask that question now, and Ray can.
No, and I'm quite happy to answer that one myself. With our declaration of emergency, it is the duty of the mayor to make the declaration, and through the advice of certainly the CAO, and if need be, going back to council. Sometimes there isn't time for that. So Terry, it's not really something that every council has that kind of an input in. But as far as coming out, I think that we probably will be looking at certainly more input to put it in. We went into this on the advice of the health unit, and to try and work for it that way. So it was for no other reason but to make sure that we could fight together with the pandemic. It wasn't to be able to do anything else. Actually, our operating parameters are probably less right now than they are when we operate as a whole council. But if you, well, I'll let Ray speak to it, and I don't know whether the deputy has anything to add to that as well. I think it's something that we need to discuss when we do get out of this, to see that, please God, don't ever let us have to go through anything like this again. But maybe it is something that we should discuss as to actually how we handle it. Most of these declarations would be in and out probably in less than a week. Except if you take places like Fort McMurray with flooding and fires and so on. But this is probably one of the largest declarations, the longest declarations of emergency that has probably hit anywhere in Canada. I don't know what Fort McMurray went with, but this is tough. And certainly we can discuss the reasons for why it would be lifted. And Ray, I'll let you come in to speak to the CAO and anything else. And council, as you have questions, please raise your hand, and I'll try and catch them as we go. Okay. Did you have another one, Terry? Councillor Richardson?
Yeah, I was just spurred of that, and I appreciate that. And like I say, when I looked up the Emergency Management and Civil Protection Act, I mean, it's very explanatory that yes, the mayor, head of council, declares emergency. But then when you look at subsection 2, it states the head of council, or the mayor or the head of council. So I just thought it would be important that we as a team should be involved in that decision making. So, but I'll let Ray do his presentation. If I get anything further after that, I can add to that.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Cowrie.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of council. I just want to take a quick second to go over the report and just the framework of it. Just to reiterate a couple of things that the mayor had said, was the emergency response duties. So the 3 columns that talk about the control group, the council, and the staff. Really, while an emergency is going on, normal municipal operations have to continue. So we still have services we have to provide and things we have to do. This particular pandemic emergency has been very different than most emergencies that we would encounter, simply because of the physical separation that has been required, which has really removed the opportunity for council to meet in person, which obviously with this early in the term and people are just hitting stride, the frustration, it's a frustrating process for everyone. The three areas were really to try and indicate while an emergency is going on, the Municipal Emergency Control Group is simply looking after decisions that have to be made to keep the emergency under control. The council, in the case when an emergency is on, is still responsible for all the other duties, all the other things that fall outside of that particular emergency. This being a particular public health emergency, there was obviously a number of decisions that public health wanted implemented, and the province put special orders in, such as the closing of certain municipal facilities, the distancing requirements that created quite a few of our services to be closed down, and only essential services then to be provided. And so the list of, I guess, normal operations took place during the early stages of this emergency were somewhat limited, and with council's separation requirements and the eventual virtual meetings, that obviously sort of controlled the interaction, I think, between the normal operations and council to some extent. But simply the intent is just to show that the first columns for the control group, the council, and the staff were really established to be sort of protocols for any emergency, that not particularly just this pandemic, but any particular emergency, that there's various roles in each of the departments that would look after specific areas of an emergency. And so when it talks about the role of council on this particular chart, it's talking about the normal operations of council still continue, with the exception of those particular areas where the emergency control group's making decisions. And the decisions are very much, as the deputy mayor said, operational type decisions, as opposed to broader policy decisions. The staff column, the reason some of the definitions are in the staff column is because staff during an emergency situation are playing two roles. They're playing both their emergency role and their normal operational role, and sometimes that they change quite a bit from what their normal function would be. And so it's important under the staff one to try and identify by department what those are. So that's basically the first three columns. The latter columns are specifically related to this emergency only and the pandemic. We're structured around what the province originally stated was a sort of a three-level approach, although we found that every day there seems to be a second half step or a tiny step forward on different levels. Level 0 lockdown was really where we were originally. If you think a couple of weeks into this was the major lockdown, no face-to-face. Virtual meetings hadn't yet been introduced, but our policies came about to have virtual meetings because we couldn't meet in person, or we couldn't meet inside the buildings. And so it talks in the report, I know there's 4 levels, level 0, 1, 2, and 3, and then level 1 has a kind of maximum range in it, and the report talks about the 3 main levels. The 3 main levels are 0 through 2. The third level is really what we assume will be our new normal, which probably won't ever be back to the way things were, but whatever that is carrying forward. So that's, once we're into level 3, emergency control group is pretty much, their role is pretty much minimized, and we're really into full council, which is why it talks about the lifting of the emergency at the latter stages of level 2. So the municipal control group is still somewhat active and making decisions, although the decisions become more and more operationally as we move through from level 0 to level 2. The only reason it suggested that the mayor lift the emergency was simply because the mayor actually signed the order going into the emergency and actually signed the order coming out. That's why the mayor, obviously, all the input going in, it was a number of people, basically public health, recommending that we follow suit and have a county-wide emergency, the county requiring the support of the lower tiers, and the mayor taking the advice of public health, the county, and the lower control group when it was signed. Obviously, the input into that can be much broader. But certainly it was just the intent. It was just specifying the mayor just signs the lifting that goes into the province. So that's the particular reference there. It's not to exclude council from providing input or helping make that decision. It was just who is signing the actual order when it goes back. Certainly, this is changing. Even the provincial decisions today there was decision.
Oh, gone.
Sorry, she kicked me out of the meeting for a second there, folks.
That's all powerful Susan.
I'm not sure if Madam Mayor did that herself or if it was something else that kicked me out, but sorry about that. So the various levels are basically to try and give an idea to the public and staff as to when things may have to open or close depending on public health's direction when we're taking a step forward or taking a step back on the process. Level 1 was basically divided. The municipal control group felt that as we move through this process, some service areas may be more strict as far as the approach than others. I'm locked up again.
No,
Madam
you're-
Mayor, I apologize. Can you hear me okay, or am I locked up?
No, you're okay.
Okay, sorry about that. So level 1 is basically where it's strict to eased is a minimum and maximum for that particular range. And so hopefully that gives an idea on some of those particular service levels. I'm not sure if council has a particular question on a particular service level or a particular question on how we move through the levels, but I'm willing to take any questions you may have.
Any questions from council to see out? Councilor Richardson?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just wondering, as we're moving forward, with respect to the delegation of powers, is that something that we can deal with prior to exiting the state of emergency? Now that we've got the ability to meet on a regular basis and hopefully meet in person, or is that something that should be or is married to the emergency situation that we're in?
Yes, thank you. It certainly can be removed prior to the lifting of the full emergency. The initial bylaw was put in place when we weren't sure how we were going to actually have physical meetings. In fact, right now on the chart, we're probably moved beyond level 0 into, we're somewhere between level 1 strict and level 1 eased. Level 1 eased is when basically staff start coming back in, but we're not necessarily into full public service mode yet. And it is suggested as we get into a regular more that we take a look at the delegation of powers and whether all of those are still required and possibly as we're having meetings, not look at having all of those in place, maybe a couple of them, but maybe not all of them are required. And then as we move into level 2 recovery and council is up and having more meetings, the suggestion would certainly be that we don't need to proceed with the delegation of powers. The authority of the municipal control group may still be in effect as far as making some decisions, but the delegation of powers is really dealing with the second category on the chart, which is the council powers. And that was initially put in place because we weren't sure how we were going to have meetings. And then as we move through and you get into regular meetings, that type of thing, we should look at starting to lift those as we move into level 1 east, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Yes. Sorry, yes.
Okay. Any further questions? Deputy Mayor Kaiser?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just was going to ask if Mr. Callery could communicate to the group and to the public listening sort of the decision process between moving and how it's tied to the province and the medical officer health and some suggestion of timelines or the perception of how the timelines may play into that.
Okay. Thank you through the mayor. The intention to move through levels, I would like to say there's specific dates involved, but it's not so much date related, but it's in how the province is opening up other particular services. So one of the things we have to look at is what we've tried to do on this chart is look at the relative services in comparison to each other as they relate to public health concerns from this particular pandemic. So for instance, we've placed the opening of public washrooms under facilities. If you look at where it says public washrooms, it's really into level 3 COVID aware. So as we move out of the emergency, we start looking at more access to public washroom facilities because they're an area that has a higher level of possible COVID transmission. There's lots of touchable areas. There's never issues. Now, the province today said that the municipality could look at potential washroom openings, but our suggestion from that would be we would want to see other services opened, cleaned, and maintained and available for safe use to the public before we look at that particular aspect of our service levels. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that there might not be a washroom somewhere that has to be open, but in general terms, those are the way we're kind of proceeding through the concepts. So we have how we're operating sort of landfill sites in the eased mode is somewhat different than when we open playgrounds. And even the province, we've tried to reflect the fact that playgrounds are probably are in the later stages of the recovery as opposed to in level 1 eased. And in comparison for services, what we're trying to say is that the where we get into right now, we have a lot of staff that are on alternate work plans and working in other locations. We want to try and move to a more normal work environment, bring our staff back in a very safe way, make sure that the physical distancing that's required, the office buildings have been basically introducing the staff back in is done in a very safe and systematic way. Work with that, make sure that's effective, and then start introducing the public into in the recovery phase. So, if somebody asks me whereabouts are we, we're looking to get into a level 1 eased very shortly. Once we have those services available and once we are comfortable that we're doing things properly in that, then we'd look at sort of a level 2 recovery. And some of the timeframes we looked at was sort of a June 1st for really being into level 1 eased, possibly 3 or 4 weeks later, taking a look at the recovery model. Now, we're going to have to move in relation to how other services are open in our community. We're gonna have to take that under consideration. We also have to make sure that if there is physical changes that need to be made in some of our buildings to provide safe customer service with proper social physical distancing, we wanna make sure that we have time to implement those effectively and communicate not only to council staff, but also the public on how that's gonna work. And we've seen various levels of success in the private sector as things get announced quickly and people try and move into providing a full range of service. There's those hiccups, those steps. We want to make sure we do that in a very systematic way.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Johnson?
Thank you, Mayor. This is a really good indication of how the department's work schedules will change as we go through the levels towards recovery and awareness. And from what you have just said with regards to distancing, I'm wondering if you are also going to take your cue from a lot of larger businesses that are allowing some staff to work from home. And I know up to this point, staff that has been working from home has been doing like daily check-ins and conversations. But if the focus then could just be, rather than putting that burden on someone else, if you've considered work performance, just this is what needs to be done within this timeline to achieve that. And that allows for a little bit easing of space in some of the workplaces where we have more people working in tighter, more confined areas.
So right now we have looked at the sort of what's been gone on for alternate work plans right now. We've gauged not only the sort of the numbers, and they've ranged any particular week from 15, I think at the maximum, there was maybe 22 or 23 that were on alternate work arrangements. We've also had staff that aren't necessarily, alternate work arrangements don't just mean work at home. We have staff that were divided into different crews reporting to different buildings. We have to take a look at all of those particular opportunities, I guess, moving forward. I know that there are, taking a look at the longer term impacts of where staff work and where they need to be. It is all part of the process. And a lot of that analysis is going to come in the later stages of the recovery, because we're going to have to take a look back at how everything functioned, where things went well, where things didn't go well, and what lessons we learn. Certainly, this type of communication, even virtual communication, has become a lot more prevalent over the last few weeks. It's not just a matter of, when can we get back to face and we completely abandon this type of communication in the future. It's how we integrate all of these things we've learned and changes that we're going to have to make going forward. Certainly from just bringing staff in, we want to make sure that we get a lot of input. We want to make sure we understand concerns in the workplace from a health and safety perspective. And quite frankly, from an accommodation perspective, we still need to take a look at that. There are still elder care and child care issues that are related to this pandemic that aren't going to be solved overnight. And we have to take a look at how they can be achieved. And we're trying to come up with some of those recommendations now. Our hope is that by later this week, we'll have some better plans in place and move forward. But we are going to have to look at some continued accommodation issues, and we will look at that. How far we go long term, I think that's going to be up to presenting some reports back to council and figuring out how we want to do business moving in the future.
Okay. Any further comments? Any comments or questions on the chart itself? And council, I don't take lightly at all your concern for maybe not being as large a part of this. And I think there are probably all kinds of councils across Ontario that would like to take a better look at the both the communication, the workings of these. Again, I say that they're normally short term. I think that after going through this long term, and I think that we're probably in it for a bit longer, as far as lifting the declaration, that we do need to have a very fulsome account. It's and discussion on it. It isn't that I feel badly that we've done anything wrong. I just think we've gone according to protocol, but I also can appreciate that having been on council now and really got your feet wet for 16 months, that the feeling is that everything sort of ground to a halt. Well, it did. And we just need to find a way that please don't let this happen again. But I think we need to clear the air, say what people think, see what things need to be changed. I'm not just going to wipe this under the rug. When we get into face-to-face meetings, I want to make sure that we discuss this in a very open way to find out just what you think has gone wrong. I don't think there's been anything go wrong as far as things have been handled, whether you feel that it has been choices for boat launches and so on. All this has to move at a rapid pace to make sure that we're looking after staff and residents. So, but I do think that it needs to be looked at fully, and probably right across the province, and maybe even right across the country. I don't think other than a world war, did they ever think we would be in there this long. I won't belabor the fact I do take what you say very seriously, and I take it to heart. So I need, you have a recommendation that we receive the emergency response duties and pandemic service response report and chart, and further that staff develop a communication tool for the public and an implementation plan for the various stages. Do I have someone that wants to move that? Deputy Mayor Kaiser, seconded by Councillor Pennell. All in favor of that motion? Opposed? 2 opposed. Okay, so carried with 2 opposed. 5.2 CAO council meeting schedule and meeting protocols. You have before you a recommendation that we would be looking at moving to Selby. I'll ask our CAO, Mr. Cowrie, to speak to this and give us the reasons that the MECG has looked at this as an alternative for meetings for the next little while. Mr. Cowrie?
Good evening again. The report went where we are on the recovery stage. We look at level 1 ease, and we look at the chart as to where we're going. It's certainly moving towards trying to get council back to some face-to-face meetings. The initial phases of face-to-face meetings would certainly, the way things are developed right now, would be council meeting face-to-face. The meetings still be in a similar format to this with virtual out to the public. We would eventually once we move from the level 1 eased into recovery, start introducing, first step would be introduced specific delegations, registered delegations. The second step would be then moving into whatever the future looks of public physical distancing until the province moves or public health moves away from the requirement for physical distancing, which could be some time. Brant Zetterberg, our general manager of community and corporate services, does logistics for the emergency control group. He looked at a number of options, did some research, and presented his understandings back to both senior management and discussed it with the municipal emergency control group. The purpose of this report is foremost, the purpose of this report is trying to get back to regular face-to-face meetings in a location. The upstairs council chambers, as everyone knows it today, is a limited space facility, and it has some drawbacks. So one of the drawbacks from the space and the design is the fact that we can physically move desks to be so that everyone can maintain the 6-foot physical distancing, get in 7 counselors, the clerk and the senior management team, but no other staff. So to try and have other staff that come in and come out and do presentations, the space really doesn't allow for that, to adequately do that and keep 6 feet of the 6 feet of separation. We've tried a number of different configurations to try and lay that out and test that. We could look at the potential of doing that for a couple of meetings, but certainly once we got into the introduction of the public, introduction of the public into that room with physical distancing is almost impossible. And there are some points that create some issues. So physical distancing, if somebody needs the lift to get up onto the 2nd floor, could be done with the person and the staff member in full PPE because you're in such a tight space. That isn't obviously an elevator, it's only a lift, so it has to be run by a certified employee trained to do that. That becomes a bit of an issue, and the control points, because we're on 2 different levels. The other consideration that staff took into account when looking at the town hall facility is it is possible when we find out the physical distancing needs of staff for the first phase of bringing them all back, that potentially some of that space may be required from staff, for example, from 12 Market, or even the staff are in very tight proximity in the lower level of if you think of the finance department, they're in pretty close proximity to their desks right now. And so some of those things need to be addressed on a longer term. That's not to say that those decisions have been made, because they haven't, because obviously all of those are predicated on what council would prefer to do for their council meeting. Some of the thought process was, if we can find a location that works both for the initial virtual step, but also for the longer term when we start introducing public back into both council meetings and planning meetings and other types of meetings, is that we don't have to make another change. So if we had the virtual meetings in the council chambers for a couple of meetings, then we'd be looking at trying to make another physical change to introduce the public into another space. So that was part of the consideration. The other thing that Mr. Zetterberg did was he went and he looked at all of our other hall spaces. So South Fred, because the tenant recently stopped the lease of that particular facility, it has the office space that's also available for council to go into in camera or into closed session. It has the ability to do that. It's well spaced with a couple of entrance points to try and divide the flow of traffic, but it also has a tower there that can easily be used to minimize the cost of allowing for virtual meetings from that particular location. The arena facility right now is, the SBC hall is trying to be reserved for the potential need that there might be still a medical need for that particular facility. So it has been approved for public health. Should the hospital suddenly have an overflow, or should there be a need to move people, it is being kept clean for things like a blood donor clinic and those types of things. So that space, it is also our top rental space. So if things get closer back to normal and we need a continued space for council meetings, that is one of our major rental income facilities. The North Fred Hall, it is the announcement today, but it is, staff had looked at that, and thought that some small meetings or some small partnerships with the YMCA may still be possible over the coming months as we move ahead. It is a tighter facility, a smaller facility, but we thought that there may be the potential to still have some community programming and some committee meetings that are out of that particular location. It is somewhat limited for physical distancing, and full meetings for a planning meeting might be a bit restrictive in that particular meeting space. And finally, they took a look at the South Fred Hall. The South Fred Hall is certainly large enough, but it is a space that would need the most work to try and get the virtual communications working. So to establish, it would require a tower put up there, it would require some other expenses. So it was deemed a more expensive option. In the report, Mr. Zetterberg and senior management identified $5,000 to $10,000 as a range. Part of that money is an investment in the live streaming and new sound system that's going to be required no matter what we do. So that isn't lost money by doing that from a potential location. It is stuff that can be reused and moved. There will be some costs that will be specific to any facility. It is possible that in a hall we would require some specialized, you think the plexiglass, or depending what a deputation desk looked like. The one thing about moving forward with those types of things is obviously if there's 3 deputations and there's still a need for physical distancing, as you bring a deputation in, it's possible that desk or that area may be completely cleaned before the next deputation comes in. So those types of things are all going to have to be considered from a health and safety perspective as we move forward. So at this point in time, staff are recommending the Selby Hall as an effective spot to try and run facilities. Although we don't have a crystal ball, it is very possible that a requirement for physical distancing could run until through December. So it could be when we talk about a temporary council chambers, if we're not just thinking maybe a couple of months, we're thinking it may be a relocation we have to use for a period of time moving forward, possibly even to the start of 2021. So if there's specific questions about IT or something like that, Mr. Zetterberg might be better positioned to answer them as having done some of the research. Otherwise, Madam Mayor, I will just wait for questions.
Okay, council, questions? Councillor Pennell, and then I'll get to Councillor McCormack next.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm just wondering, I'm not sure who to direct this question to, maybe to Paul, but as Ray was saying, the AV equipment needed would not be lost money. It'd be something that we could reuse going forward. I do believe that we did budget for this already, and throughout what we did scale back on when we got into this pandemic, that was one thing that we decided to keep on the books. Is that still the way that I understand it?
Paul, do you wish to answer that, please?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I can step in for that. Yeah, that the project for the live streaming and the audiovisual update at the council chambers on 124 John Street, I believe it was $30,000, if memory serves me correct, to move forward with that project. What the CAO was saying was that it's not new money or new expense. It's taking that money, putting it into equipment that could then be moved once the permanent solution, or we get back to a greater sense of normalcy. That equipment could then be taken from Selby Hall and moved by township staff. So what the CAO was saying was correct, that would not be an added expense. It would just be a different way of utilizing the expense that's already been approved, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Pennell, does that give you the answer that you need? Councillor McCormack?
An observation I see tonight, there's 16 participants. I would suggest that possibly half of those will be involved in the discussions tonight. The other half are just observers. So before going up to Selby, I would be the mindset that we try and work with Town Hall initially, and things are changing rapidly. 1 week, we turned down opening up the boat ramps. The following week, the communities around us decided to open them up. The first week, we had a strict policy on how we were going to reopen the dump. It didn't work out the way it was supposed to. We made some changes, and I think it was yesterday or today that I read that Doug Ford is now considering loosening up restrictions of 5 people to possibly 10 people. So before we, in my opinion, decide to go up to Selby, I would like to see us, just council, immediate staff, additional staff could be in the other boardroom. If they need to come in and speak, they could come in and speak. It's going to be broadcast. They're going to see it exactly the way we see it now, but at least it would give council an opportunity to be face to face with senior staff and get back to a more normal system without having to go up to Selby. Just a thought that we try that for a couple of council meetings and see how it goes, because things are changing.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Nori? Yep.
No, I agree. And also I'm concerned about spending $10,000. I know they say it's in the budget, but things are so scary right now from federal on down. We don't know where money's coming, what we're going to get. If we could save $10,000, let's try what Councillor McCormack said. We're not reinventing the wheel. We're going to use our good facility. It has all the infrastructure, and let's just give it a try. But I can't say to the taxpayers around here, oh, we're spending 10 grand to go to Selby. I just can't. That's all.
Okay. Deputy Mayor Kaiser?
Thank you, Your Worship. As far as Selby goes, one of the things that I think is something really important to consider, Selby has no other active use at this time. It means there's no other people visiting that site on a daily basis, whereas Town Hall has a number of staff who have to work there every day. By moving to Selby, we avoid crossing paths, cross-contaminating with a workspace where people are expected to show up to work every day. I don't think any of us have it. I mean, but we still have to maintain our distancing. I don't have any problem, and I actually agree with it. There's a dedicated entrance. It's full accessible entrance directly from the parking lot into the big room. One door and you're in. That's minimum amount of cleaning, minimum amount of stress, concern. You have to remember that we are also asking for all of our town staff to accommodate us coming into their workspaces or to clean up after our meetings. When I say clean up, I mean for the COVID purposes, to disinfect the space. By taking it out of what is otherwise a workspace, and that room, as Ray mentioned, the council chambers may need to be utilized for physical distancing of regular staff because they can't achieve that distancing in their normal workspace. So this is not, I don't see this as parallel to the dump or any of those other considerations that were a little more fluid and a little more learning curve. We've had 9 weeks to come to grips with the fact that we have this pandemic, this recovery period. 9 weeks suggests a year to 18 months of recovery. This is not short term. This is not over the summer. This is at least the end of the calendar year and probably longer. I recognize that it's a longer drive for Councillor McCormack and myself. It's a longer drive for most of us. Actually, nobody's closer to Selby, so I guess it's a longer drive for everybody. But I think that's something we just have to get over. It's only a couple more minutes. I want to meet in person. I want to get back to that sense of normalcy. I don't like this situation that we're dealing with, and I want to get back to the same room. Having a room that big allows for our staff to be in the room with us. Yes, there are 16 people in this room with us tonight, and most of these staff will take part in the discussion or need to be available for us. That's a good spot, and it serves a lot of purpose and crosses a lot of checks off a lot of things on the list of need in order to provide that for us. I'm very much in favor of doing something. Staff did a very fulsome look at all of our facilities. here's a room that we have and we can use, and it's minimum impact to everyone around us, except for the people who have to drive there. And quite honestly, Selby is going to be difficult on the staff too, just because they have to pick up and move to arrive there for the meeting for 7 o'clock. But outside of that, it's the least impacting to the staff in total. That's my opinion.
I'm sorry, Paul, you came on the screen first, so you must have something to say that's going to be a financial.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor, and I do apologize, but I did have 2 items that would be financial to contribute, just so that council has a full understanding of that information and the impact. As we redo the office space at 124 John Street, we do need to look at the fact that, especially in the front with the finance staff, that they are very tight, and at present, when they come back, they cannot observe the 6-foot distancing. We are having to consider the fact that there's a possibility you might need to move 2 or 3 staff up into the council chambers until such time as that distancing might be released sometime in the future. If we were to use that for council meetings, those 2 meetings a month, we might have to look at the possibility of moving staff to another building, splitting up a team, and incurring costs to set them up in another venue. And then the second item I'll address, and then I'll quit, is that we're not spending $10,000 to outfit Selby. We would be spending money to outfit at 124 John Street, because we're not able to live stream at this point. We're live streaming now because we're on Zoom. We can't use Zoom in the council chambers because the feedback and the echo would be absolutely horrendous, and it would just it would overwhelm the meeting. So we would have to spend some equipment anyway at 124 John Street. What we're proposing is that we spend the money at Selby, and then that equipment at a later time could be picked up and then moved back to John Street. So either way, we're going to be spending money.
Yep, thank you, Paul. Councillor Richardson?
Thank you, Worship. I mean, I have to agree with Councillors Norrie and Councillors McCormick. When I first read this, I was taken aback. In these tough fiscal times, the $5,000 to $10,000 is a little concerning for me. I mean, we have to be a little more fiscally responsible, and I understand that we may end up having to spend some money in the future. But I have to agree with Councillor McCormick that we have a facility which, even listening to Mr. Callery, that we could try and see if it works. So if there's new equipment that needs to be bought, it could be moved from Town Hall to Selby if we have to. I really do think we should take a kick at this. And the other thing we have to keep in mind is none of us mind making the drive to Selby. Lord knows I've made the drive millions of times in my baseball days. But we got to keep in mind our citizens that show up for our council meetings, that may walk to the council meetings. Now they're going to be required to drive north to Selby. And like I say, I drive steady. I mean, I put a lot of miles on my vehicle. But there are some out there that don't. And we have to keep that in mind, that that our citizens are used to coming to our town hall, the ones that do observe our council meetings. And I just don't want to put them out so that they have to drive up to Selby. So I'd be for giving this a go at, I mean, I just, the money, it bothers me a little bit in the fact that I don't want to spend that money right now. If we can do a workaround, and Lord knows things are going to change probably before our next meeting, we can reassess it. But I'd like to give it a kick at our regular council facility. The other thing we have to keep in mind is, yes, Selby is wide open, and maybe food for thought is that they had offices up there in the one side of the building. Maybe some of our staff, I'm sure some of our staff live north of town. Maybe they could, we could find some room or facility or office space for our staff in that building, which we own. I mean, that's a thought, rather than trying to customize and build offices by the sounds of it in our council chambers. We've got facilities there that are built for offices. That's what they were. So, I mean, that's an option as well. But I say $10,000, even if it's $5,000 in these times, are a little concerning to me. So, thank you.
I just have a note here from and a good point too, that just to keep in mind that it would probably cost us $10,000 at least to be sending staff out. But I'm not going to comment any further here until we get all the council, and I'm going to let you go ahead here, Councillor Pennell.
Thank you, Worship. I just wanted to touch base on a few things that have been said. One is the money needs to be spent no matter what. Unless we keep this particular platform that we're using now, the public is not going to be able to gain access to our meetings. If we choose to, so the money for the AV system is going to need to be purchased, whether we're at Selby or whether we're in Town Hall. If we go to Town Hall and we all have our 6 feet of separation, even with the staff that need to be there, staff in the back room, by the time that we add the public, there's only going to be a few public in there as well. So I just wanted to point that out, that it is a confined space, and I understand what people are saying about driving and having residents walk to the location. However, for the couple of meetings that we do have a month, I would rather have the public drive than to have our staff drive every day. And that's all I got to say about that.
Councillor Johnson and then Deputy Mayor Kaiser.
Thank you, Mayor. We've had interesting debate on both sides of this topic, and I agree with our councillors who say this is a difficult time to spend $10,000. From what I'm hearing in the discussions, this is not so much about what's best for council, but as to what is best for our staff moving forward. I don't think that we're going to see an end to social distancing in 2 months. I think we can expect to carry that forward at least for 6 months. For the next level 2 recovery, we cannot have council meetings with the public present regardless, so we can set up in Town Hall for that period of time and then just have further investigation done as to which staff people need to work in which location, and decide whether it's staff people that would work better at Selby Hall or whether the staff people need to move upstairs to council chambers and council needs to move. We're not getting a lot of people watching on YouTube or watching the Zoom meetings this way. We need to have people back in the council chambers so that they have a following of what's going on.
Deputy
That's
Mayor.
it.
Thank you. Did you have your hand up, Deputy Mayor Kaiser? Thank you.
Yes, I did, Your Worship. Thank you for that. From the way I see it, we're either in a Zoom platform, as we are now, working from home, or we're in a room and we're spending $5,000 to $10,000 on AV equipment to put it on YouTube. I don't want to be on Zoom, and not that I'm saying I want to spend the money, but I would rather be in person and spend a few thousand to get it live and on Zoom than be stuck in this box like this. This is not. This is a little bit stressful and a little unwelcome for me. The other thing, I just wanted to speak to the comment about the general public at the meetings. The only public that will be at our council meetings for the foreseeable future, and not anytime soon, are scheduled deputations only. We're talking of just a very short handful of people, and those the people who had a deputation to make and took the time to get on the agenda to come and speak to us about something that needs to happen or needs to be done or whatever. That's a very short list of people. Might be 1, might be 3, might be none on any given council meeting. The general public attending council meetings isn't going to happen until we are out past level 3 and back to normal or new normal, whatever that is. So the idea that we have to allow for people to walk to the meetings, by the time we get there, we're back to sort of business as usual or business as new normal or whatever. And we can be wherever. We can be back in council chambers, sitting elbow to elbow. So I don't think that's a concern that we need to consider at this time. And I want to go back to my earlier statement to say this reality of limited access, limited people, staff only. This is 6 to 9 to 15 months. We got to set it up and set it up right. I'm not saying that you're wrong to say, try it here and let it fail. I know it's going to be difficult. And I think staff have taken a really serious look at this. A lot of discussion went into it about the logistics of it, logistics of staff coming back to work. These measures are going to be months and months and months. Simply saying, well, let's throw a couple staff in that building and a couple staff in that building. That's what we've done for the last few weeks. And it hasn't been the easiest thing on staff as it is. Some of our facilities and maintenance staff have been arriving to North Fred so that they weren't showing up, you know, at the SPC with the other staff. I mean, people have been stretched and spread out already and making accommodations. Let's let them get back to normal. They're the ones who function every day. We meet twice a month, 2 meetings, 2 evenings a month. I think we can make an accommodation going with the staff recommendation of moving to Selby. I recommend we spend the few $1,000s it's going to take to get us live streaming on YouTube, but allow us to be in person. And yeah, we're going to have to, there's going to be some learning curve and some steps that are going to have to be learned along the way. But I believe that Selby is the right choice for us right now for the next phase 1, 2, 3.
Councillor Norrie?
I'll be brief, but I take offense to the fact when you say the public won't be showing up. It doesn't matter. They have a right to show up, not a privilege, a right. And you're denying them that right if they don't have a card. So I'm saying we cannot get rid of the public's right. And this is what's happening lately. I'm not going to get on the soapbox because I'm tired of what I'm hearing from the federal government, but it's a right. And Selby may not be a right for them to show up. And we are denying them that. That's all I'm going to say.
Anything further from council? So I am going to say a few things here, but I need a question answered. How deeply, and I don't know whether I've got Peter on the line, how close are we to having committee of adjustments meetings? How close is our need for committee of adjustments meetings?
Your worship, we're getting close to the need to even have meetings that for a land use planning perspective as well. So that needs getting very close.
And that, am I right, would involve bringing in more people plus the proponents and possible opponents?
Correct.
And this, I've got to ask about 3 or 4 questions before I start my spiel. We can live stream from either the chambers or from Selby. And I don't know who's going to answer that question on there, but I expect that it's going to be Mr. Zetterberg. Thanks, Peter.
That's correct. There's some work that needs to be done in Selby, but we could live stream from either one.
But and so there is no problem. I heard something about an echo or a feedback from council chambers upstairs in the town hall. Am I right?
You're correct. We can't all be using Zoom if we're in the same room with each other.
Oh, okay. So but okay, just to make sure that I've got the right answer here. Can we live stream the meetings because we won't be able to allow public in for the time being? Can we do that from town hall as well as Selby?
Yes.
Okay. The cost to move, whether we're going to be moving staff out to Selby or whether we're going to be moving staff upstairs and have council go to Selby would be, and I know nobody can tell me what the exact is going to be, but how close would we be with the cost? And I guess maybe too, at the same point, something that can't be reused. Like, do we have desks? Do we physically haul desks to one place or another? Yeah, Paul?
The the cost to sorry, let me compose my thoughts, Madam Mayor. If we were to move staff out to Selby and we were to have council meetings on John Street, we'd be paying for 2 sets of equipment, because right now staff need the internet to continue on. So that equipment that we'd be putting in Selby for council meetings will still have to be there for staff. And then we would have to double that equipment at 124 John Street, because then we would need to broadcast live, because of the fact that we're only able to have, I think the province is making an announcement later in the week that we could have up to 10 people in a meeting. So it'd be 7 council, CAO, a clerk, and then maybe one other staff meeting rotating in and out. So the cost to move staff up there would be almost double the cost of moving council meetings up there. As well, there would be the cost to take the desks from town hall, move them up there, and then the logistics of us team being divided, and then having to have meetings and work together over 2 physical distances. It certainly could be done if council wishes that, and council wish to double our cost of technology. That could certainly be done, and we could move forward with it. But we would be looking at a higher cost to move staff out there.
I'm not done yet, guys. What we have here is, and I appreciate Councillor Norrie saying the public should have access to these meetings, and that maybe there are very few people watching this tonight, which is unfortunate, because they all said that they wanted it, and now they're getting it, and they're not, but I'm sure some of them watch it recorded as well. We do need to make sure that we give everybody the opportunity to be in the chambers at all times. I'm going to say this out loud and probably be all over Facebook tomorrow, but that's fine. We don't get huge turnouts at our meetings. It wouldn't care whether you held them at the Loaf and Ale. I'm not so sure that we wouldn't get it, which is unfortunate. But do we need to encourage people to be there? Sure. We have staff that we have put in pigeonholes all over the place. And that's 5 days a week for them, every day of the week. And now we're asking to move some of them either out to Selby, so that they're going there constantly instead of us going twice a month. I think that if we can't decide to not go out to Selby, and this is just a suggestion which you can discuss, why don't we stay right exactly where we are? We all hate this Zoom stuff, but why don't we see what changes will be brought about, what changes we can make for staff to accommodate them where they need to go, have a better and solid idea, and let's stay on this for June the 9th, and maybe let's stay on it for June, whatever the next one is, so that we're not inconveniencing staff. I mean, one of the biggest problems with us is we are spread all over, just like a dog's breakfast for staff, which makes communication, which makes bringing them back from a fairly traumatic time where they've been at home, they're trying to work around childcare or elder care, and some of them very afraid of what's going to happen when they come back. I don't think we can have the physical distancing and make it safe for them. So I know that somebody's going to throw and I will let Councillor Richardson and Councillor McCormack speak, and then of course, as usual, I get the last word. But I really believe that we need to turn this into what's the best way for the whole of the municipality, not just what's the best way for us. It has to be something that we can look after our staff, make them work in an environment that works for them and is safe, without causing any more inconvenience, without dragging desks all over the place. And if we have to, then we'll stay to this. But Councillor Richardson, you had your hand up first, and then I'll go to Councillor McCormack.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I mentioned the office space up in Selby just as a suggestion. I don't think that, and I've heard nothing from any of our managers that that's even been priced out or it's even an option. I don't even know if it's an option. I know that there's office space up there. It was simply put out there as a suggestion. But and I do feel for our employees, just the fact that we're even thinking about moving our employees into a makeshift office, for better lack of a word, upstairs is concerning in and of itself. I'm not sure what space upstairs was going to be considered, whether chambers themselves was what was going to be used, or if the back lunchroom was what was going to be used, or and I sorry to say it, your worship, maybe your office. I don't know.
You're welcome to it.
I just don't know. I don't know what. I think it would be a little bit ridiculous to suggest that we're going to move our staff into, say, council chambers. It just doesn't make any sense to me. So, I mean, I guess optimally, and I don't know, I haven't heard as to how many staff are going to be moved up there, whether 1, 2, 3, 6. In any event, I really feel that there's a whole lot of decisions yet to be made. We're not going to get any public into our council meetings at this point. And I think that our chambers would suffice for now before we go and spend a bunch of money to maybe 2 weeks down the road or 3 weeks down the road. And I hope the deputy mayor is wrong. I hope we're not 18 months down the road. But that's the problem, right? Is that we just don't know. But I would like to, before we go and spend a pile of money, take the attempt of see if we can make this work on our council chambers, and that helps out our public as well. So,
Councilor McCormack, thank you.
I think what I'd like to see, getting back to my first comments, is that we not rush into making a move up to Selby. I appreciate your comment just before that we might as well stay with the system we have right now rather than make a fast move. If we want to meet in person, I'm still going to support doing it initially at Town Hall. It doesn't have to be June 9th. I think that's kind of quick. Question to Paul or Ray, do you expect bringing staff back to work within the confines of the building in the next 2-3 weeks? Is that what's being planned?
Maybe I can try and address that for council. Right now, we've sent out voluntary surveys to find out what all of the staff issues and concerns are. And I think council's also received a copy of that survey, and some council have actually even sent in some of their responses. The idea is to try and really gauge where the health and safety concerns are and what the real health and safety issues are for staff, and try and address those. So we just got that survey in today, and there's still some outstanding surveys we would like to get back from the majority of staff who want to participate in that process. Once we have those, we'll have a better understanding of the overall, what the overall impacts are that we really need to try and address. There are, I can tell you from the ones received from 124 John to date, and very preliminary, just taking a glance at them before the council meeting. There are concerns with regard to spatial separations of existing desks, of hallway widths when passing in the hallway, and things like that, which are legitimate concerns, and the front office is a fairly tight space. I want to make it clear to council, there has been no determination. The next stage in this process is for senior management to review all the different facilities and all the comments we received on our different office space and work environments. We were then going to consult with our health and safety group to make sure that they have an understanding of what our thoughts were and where to go from there. So that's the process we're in right now. So there hasn't been any determination made. Obviously, all the space within Town Hall was identified, and 12 Market Square was identified as some possible tight areas for physical distancing as well, that we have to take a look at. We will look at all space requirements. Certainly, we are trying not to separate staff any further than we have to, but there is no decisions have been made on that, and we certainly wanted to get the feeling of council tonight before we make any of those decisions. The in-person meetings, or the dates, and we'll get into it in a further report in this agenda. But certainly there is, as we move through the table on the recovery basis and we get to more regularized stuff there is a heavier agendas, and it's somewhat easier to talk in person. From staff's perspective, it was easier to both present and talk, for council to be able to talk in person as we get into those agendas. And there's a report later on in this particular agenda that deals with actually moving a additional budget meeting, because the budget that council passed very clearly was done pretty quickly just before the pandemic got into full swing, and council wants to take a look at all the impacts of that. And I know that our finance staff are working very hard at trying to collect that information as it comes in. Those types of conversations obviously lend themselves to in-person conversations. So we are trying to get those meetings in June and try and get back to that. And we're also aware of the development services concerns. But having said that, we can make whatever direction council wants try and work. I can tell you from the spatial distancing in the facility, in the upstairs council chambers that we did lay out, that from the mayor's desk to the back door where you enter the council chambers is basically where the last staff member would sit. So if you put 6 feet spatial separation in there to get the clerk and senior managers in there, you're from where the mayor currently sits in the council chambers to the very back door coming in is where the last desk is. So there is no additional room. And once you're in your seat, the passageways are somewhat narrow for spatial distancing from that perspective. So, you know, the question, if the council's question is, can you actually make people fit? The answer is yes. Is it tight? Very definitely. Could you introduce other people in the room? The answer would be not to the best of our ability at this point in time, but no decision has been made about moving staff upstairs. It's just simply space. We're looking at all space options as a possibility. The concern from staff, just to reiterate when we spoke, was that we are trying to learn from things like the landfills and everything else, and we do know things are going to change over time. Our thought process was if council found a location they were comfortable with, we were able to make it work in the short term and also make it work over the longer. One less change we have to make once we kind of get back in the swing of things, because there are changes no matter where we hold these on how staff prepare before the meetings and how staff get reports and how we get the audiovisual set up and all those types of issues. So we can make anything work, just to be clear, but those were the types of considerations we were trying to take into mind.
Yeah, Councillor McCormack.
Just to finish off, based on the information that we have tonight, I would like to suggest that we put this over until the next council meeting. And in the interim, I'd like to have an example as to what the costing would be to set up, as an example, South Fred Hall, just to have some numbers to compare. Because in the long run, a centralized location is fair for everybody. And if it's in the north end, in the long run, that's going to be a hindrance for people that are at the other end of Greater Napanee. So before I support a decision, I'd like to have more information and I'd like to have comparisons.
Councillor Johnson, and then we better get a motion and move this on.
Thank you, Mayor. I know we would all much rather be face-to-face having these discussions, but I would rather see one more Zoom meeting while we figure out what staff needs to work so they can work effectively and put their needs ahead of ours. And they're not there yet. They don't know what their new workplaces are going to look like. They haven't had time to figure that out. And I think that needs to be done first.
Okay, thank you. And just I'll make one last comment, then I'll entertain the physical distancing. The 2 meters, the 6 feet is not going to change. There are ways of getting around it. We could all wear masks, not funny masks, but medical masks. That is something that's possible. But I agree. We maybe need more information before we jump forward, and we don't know what tomorrow is going to bring with what Mr. Ford is going to say. But through the health unit, through our meetings with the health unit, and then I have another one tomorrow, and I will ask the question, which I will then pass on the answer to all of you. How long are we going to see the physical distancing? Is that a real deterrent for the pandemic itself. Is that one way of making sure that the COVID-19 stays beaten down? And we know we're going to get another wave. So even the changes that we make might not be there forever. So there are two parts to this. We need to decide for June as to what we're going to do. And if that's to allow, as Councillor McCormick said, to get more information for South Fred or Selby, if we want to go both ends of the spectrum. And if you want to look at it, even at the SPC, which is the center. But we also need we need a resolution for the council meeting that was June 16th, which was at Adolphus Town Hall, that we need to make sure that it will be rescheduled in the future. So I'll entertain a motion as to just if the councillor wants to say what they'd like to do, and then we'll take a vote on it. Mr. Cowrie, did you want to say something first?
Yeah, sorry, just 2 points on, or I guess one major point on that is when council makes the recommendation, I do understand since this report came out, there's been confirmation that one of the councillors is planning some vacation on which would be the 4th Tuesday of June. So we'll leave it up to council whether or not they want to proceed with the 2nd and 4th to get back on a regular schedule, or if they'd prefer to keep the 16th and possibly not have it at the Adolphus Town Hall, but have it another location to accommodate all the council. I'm only aware of the one councillor, but I believe there's a councillor who's planning on a vacation around the 4th Tuesday of the month.
So then what Tuesdays are we looking at that would be working? Because for this, we need all of council. There's no getting around it.
It is possible, I believe, that the 9th and the one after the 16th would still be available. I don't have all the councillor schedules in front of me. I just was aware of the one vacation request or the one vacation booking. It's possible you could keep the 16th. It puts 2 meetings, a very tight agenda for the clerk. It would depend on what you want to do with the budget meeting, whether one was just solely a budget meeting for that purpose, in which case most of the work is on the treasurer, but there's still work on the clerk to turn around an agenda within 1 week, which is somewhat difficult, but was planned. It's possible to keep that and maybe move it from the Adolphus Town Hall to either a physical location or a Zoom, depending on how council wants to do that. So I apologize for interrupting, Madam Mayor.
No interruption at all, and I should have thought of that myself. So before somebody puts forth a motion, does the 9th and the 16th work for everyone? Yes, 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 yes. Okay, so we're good for all of them. Okay, council, your wishes, please. Councilor McCormick, yeah.
So I would like to make a motion that we put this over until the 9th to make a decision on an alternate location, and request that we get comparative costing for the SPC and also South Fred Hall as comparisons.
So SPC, South Fred and Selby?
Yes, please.
And, okay, I think that should be enough. And added to that further that the resolution of council to hold a meeting of council, a resolution of council to hold a meeting of council on June 16th from the former Adolphus Township Hall be rescinded with a date to be rescheduled in the future after consultation with the Bay of Quinte UEL. Susan, is it all right to do both of those together?
Yes. Can I just confirm that the June 16th does work for every member of council?
Yes, it does. Sorry. It does.
Okay.
Okay, so we can do that together. So we have moved by Councillor McCormick, seconded by Councillor Richardson. Any further comments or questions? Councillor Richardson, did you wish to say something?
Sorry, Your Worship. Yeah, I'm wondering if we shouldn't add in the council chambers as well, just as comparative. I don't think Councillor McCormick mentioned the council chambers. I think we should mention the council chambers as a comparative as well.
So you were the seconder, so that's a friendly amendment that Councillor Richardson is asking for, Councillor McCormack, and he's your seconder as well. That it would include costings on the council chambers as well. Councillor McCormack?
Yes, that's correct. That's
Okay.
fine.
So you agree to that? You agree to
Do.
that to include council chambers?
I do, your worship. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions? Yep, Deputy Mayor Kaiser.
I'm gonna throw a bit of a wrench into this. So I have a problem with the concept of looking at another location from the point of view that I understand that our senior management staff did a fulsome review of the different accommodations, potentials, and came up with a recommendation based on a lot of things. Cost was one of them, convenience, proximity, the idea that we might even consider South Fred. No disrespect to South Fred in the least, but one of the reasons for not going to Selby was for public access. South Fred is farther from everyone except McCormack. Even I, who many people think I must be closer to South Fred, I'm south of town. It's a 1 kilometer longer drive to South Fred Hall than to Selby. And that's true for Richardson too. Actually, it's longer for Richardson. It's also further out of town. And we were also told already that South Fred would need a tower and further investment in infrastructure to support virtual meeting broadcast for the public. Like, I have a problem with it. I think staff already reviewed it without actually putting actual dollars and cents to it. There's a known that it doesn't have the infrastructure, therefore there will be a cost. Having said that, the other problem with putting it off from my perspective is we've got staff who are going to be coming back into a modified workspace soon, and we now don't know what that modified workspace might be. They're going to be in various states of unsettled for a period of time. That's what I thought we were setting out to decide this tonight, so that we could not only decide what we're going to do 2 evenings a month, but also decide what staff may or may not be able to accommodate with what spaces are left over for the foreseeable future for their daily activities. That's all I want to say.
Anything further? So just following up on what Deputy Mayor Kaiser said, today is the 19th. So if we're starting to bring back staff, then we would have 2 full weeks, 2.5 weeks that staff wouldn't really know where they're going. Anyway, if there's no further comment, I am going, sorry, Councillor Norrie?
Can you just read the motion back? I'm sorry.
Okay, Susan, could you
Please.
read the motion, please, and thank you.
Council receive and approve the council meeting schedule and meetings protocol report. Further, that staff develop comparative costings for South Fred Hall, the SPC, Selby Hall, and the council chambers for meeting locations. And further, that the 2nd and 3rd Tuesday of June be set for meeting dates, which conforms to the pandemic service response plan developed by the Municipal Emergency Control Group. Further, that the resolution of council to hold a meeting of council on June 16th in the former Adelphus Town Hall be rescinded, with the date to be rescheduled for that in the future after consultation with the Bay of Quinte UELAC.
Thank you.
Okay, everybody clear
Thank
on voting on? I'm going to request a recorded vote. Councillor McCormack. Sorry, I saw your hand. Yes, okay, that was a yes. Councillor Richardson.
Yes.
Councillor Pennell.
No.
Councillor Norrie.
Yes.
Councillor Johnson.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Kaiser,
No.
the mayor, no. Motion is carried 4-3. Okay. 5.3, financial services, May 2020 financial update. So you have a staff recommendation, but we're going to talk to Paul first and see what news he's going to bring us, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. Sorry, I'm just going over to my report. So this is a kind of a mini financial update. Basically, it just serves three purposes. I know that there was a direction to bring back in May a revisit to the budget, which had been planned. But as this meeting was called on the 19th, we'll have to defer that to June. We've just closed the bank, our bank reconciliation last month, and we're just starting to compile the information now for the actuals to April 30th. So as was indicated, to not have two meetings in the month of May, we're moving that over to June. But I did want to provide a little bit of an update here. One was just, again, a reminder to council of the services that were provided, or the changes that were provided for the residents for relief back on March 27th. Also to let council know that we're doing fairly well as far as residents making their tax payments and their water payments. We're tax payments were just down under 5% from last year. During the January to April 30th time period, and even lower in water payments at 3%. So cash flows in the general bank were just down about 7% for the same period as last year at this time. I know in the past when I brought financial updates, we've said, you know, if we were not to receive any more payments, this is how far we could go. And it grew from about a 2.5 month time frame and finally came out to about a 5-month time frame. And we're kind of looking at that same period moving forward. But at the same time, I want to wait until we bring back that update to the budget to really give a good amount of information to council for that. Finally, and that was contained on page 2 under the budget update. Finally, the third resolution is that council directs staff to follow the MECG council staff duties schedule in relation to tax and water penalties. And as you can see, that does change things under the eased section where penalties would be reintroduced. So instead of putting a time limit on it, we're just asking for council just to pass a resolution that we follow that schedule that's been brought forward earlier tonight in changes that we would make to water and tax penalties. And I'm available for any questions.
Council, any questions of Paul? Deputy Mayor Kaiser?
I guess, thank you, Your Worship. If we're going to be looking at a sort of a review of the interim budget in a few weeks' time, I just was wondering, I'm sure we'll get a more detailed answer at that time, but I'm wondering if there's any comments you could make, Mr. Delver, about our expense over revenue. In your report here, you talk about how our tax payments are actually holding up fairly well, that people are paying their taxes basically to a large percentage. But we have also implemented the free garbage tags over this period of time. We've given up some revenue on the recreation programming. And so I'm wondering if you have a sense, as you're just closing out the month of April, is there a sense that that loss of revenue from garbage tags, recreation programming, and other things, how that's impacting our expense over revenue at this time?
Through the mayor, Deputy Mayor Kaiser, yeah, our largest impacts really have been a loss of revenue from the recreation side of things, especially when it comes to Irish rentals. That's certainly a large hit that we've taken. The next largest hit would be for garbage. because of the fact that we're giving free garbage, we're not collecting those garbage tags. That's actually quite a large expense, and as well as the additional expense for that 1 week when we had unlimited bag tags. We're looking at somewhere between $10,000 and $12,000 of additional charges for that week alone. So there are certainly some higher expenses, but we've also seen a lot of savings in expenses that we're not putting out. We've staff is look to cut expenses wherever possible. I would hate to take too much of a stab, as I just started this afternoon on putting that information together. But from what I'm looking at, I believe that we are able to save as much or defer expenses to the degree of loss of revenue and extra expenses on some side, on the garbage tag side. We need to come out of this year in at least a break-even position. As everybody knows, we're not allowed to run a deficit, so we can't do that at this time. I don't see that we should be worrying too much about that, in the sense that I believe staff has been very diligent in cost saving measures, and that we are looking at basically squeezing every penny that we can out to ensure that we do not arrive at a deficit position. And in the end, in a situation in a year like this, arriving at a non-deficit or a break even or a very small surplus situation really is the ultimate goal, to basically make it through this year. And I believe that we're actually making some good steps towards that. Staff is very much watching their budgets, looking at cost saving measures, and all of our recommendations coming forward, we're always trying to come with the lowest cost measure to council, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Norrie?
Excellent job. Just a quick question. I know we've confused the public with unlimited bags to 3 bags with no tags. Have we thought of maybe going to 1 free bag and the other bags have tags, like slowly phase it back in?
That's sorry, through the mayor, that's certainly something we could do. The original recommendation of staff back in March was to have a free bag or 2 free bags. So that was introduced to the public back in March. So there's certainly not a reason where we couldn't start pulling that back. We have seen an uptick in the amount of garbage, even beyond that 1 week that we had the unlimited bags for. We have seen an uptick on people using the full allotment of the 3 bags, maybe finding more spaces that they can clean out in their house or what have you. So there has been an increased cost, even when you just factor out the actual loss of revenue from tags, as far as the tonnage cost, because we get charged for the pickup service, but we also get charged for a tonnage service. And that tonnage pickup, I believe, and I can be corrected, but I believe Andrew's on the line, that that those have increased. So certainly pulling that back it may not be a hardship. It may cause some people maybe not to clean their garages out even further, and would certainly go towards helping us in the future. So yes, in the answer to your question, Councillor Norrie, we certainly could pull it back and start scaling it back.
Okay, any further questions? Councillor Johnson?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm asking this simply because I don't know the answer. If we're currently allowing people to do 3 bags untagged, and if they have more than that, it's tagged. So clearly we're receiving funds for that. If people are feeling that their life is financially stable enough that they want to put tags on their bags to help ease the burden to the community, does that then save us money? Did I word that correctly? Sorry.
If through the mayor, Councillor Johnson, if I'm hearing you correctly, you're asking if people voluntarily bought tags and put them on the bags, would that help us financially? Yeah, if people chose to do that, then that would certainly help us financially.
So then it could be a goodwill gesture as opposed to changing the rules once again.
If they were willing, if the public were willing to do that, then yes.
Councillor McCormack.
Is it possible to buy tags at the moment?
Yep.
Through the mayor to Councillor McCormick, yes, it is. All of the locations that had been previously supplying tags, to the best of my knowledge, still have tags. We had before we got to the no bag tags system, we had a system going where those retail locations could contact us, could order the tags, and they would be dropped off in order to provide a touchless service and to make sure that those locations were fully stocked on the tags. And I believe that a good deal of them would have tags on hand.
Any further comments or questions? I mean, we've got to receive this, but it sounds like there's some things that we should be making recommendations on as well. Or are you wanting council to sit and wait until June the 9th? Did you want to make some adjustments to do with the free bag tags, the landfill, and certainly the deferral of penalty and interest?
At this point, Madam Mayor, the recommendation that we were seeking was really to, as far as the penalty and interest, was to allow staff to follow the MECG's council staff duties schedule for that. It had not been discussed as far as the bag tags. Should council wish to change that, that would certainly be financial, from a financial standpoint, would not be a bad thing at all, and I certainly would not oppose that at all.
Council? Yeah, Deputy Mayor Carthy.
If I may, I would move that we receive and support the MECG recommendation at this time.
Seconded by Councillor Pennell. Any further comments or questions? All in favor of the motion? Motion is carried unanimously. Great, thank you very much. Five 5.5.
Your Worship, may I just jump in before we move forward, because we were touching on the garbage tags. I think maybe it would be appropriate for us to consider moving to the single bag tag at the latest by phase 2, which is recovery. So a single free bag starting at the beginning of phase 2. If we tied it to that sort of concept, then we're in recovery. A lot of things are getting back to normal. See, Ray popped up. He may be having a comment on that.
Mr. Cowrie.
With the layout of the chart under the environmental services component, as we kind of suggested, we were moving towards level 1 eased and then level 2 recovery in those particular boxes. So it's the kind of the last page of the chart, very bottom row. Under the eased level, one of the things that was being contemplated was, right now we have a less than normal rate for our bulk item at the landfills. So we have a flat rate charge that's less than what we normally would for our bulk items. It was suggested in that chart that might be looked at sort of towards the latter stages of the east section, was still with the free door-to-door for the bags and the at the landfill, and then as we move to the recovery section, that we actually return to all normal fees. Once we get into the level 2 recovery, that we'd return to all normal fees for landfill purposes. So the staged approach in the chart was, and certainly we could change that, but the staged approach in the chart was to look at the bulk item fee that's less than normal right now as the first step, and then the second step being the actual at-home charges that are for residential pickup. So I just call that to council's attention.
I'd be okay with staying with that plan.
Yep, perfect. Okay, thank you. So 5.4, we're going to refer that to the June 9th meeting. There were some reports that we needed to make a fulsome decision on that, which just haven't been released yet. Do I need a motion to refer that to June 9th, Susan?
Yes, please.
Okay, moved by Deputy Mayor Kaiser, seconded by Councillor Richardson. All in favor of that motion? Motion is carried unanimously. Thank you. Now, we are on to raw water main replacement intake design. Mr. Dafo.
Your worship, I think most of the details are embedded in the report. I guess a couple comments I'd like to make is the in-kind commitment through Dornicamp to replace all that pipe is a significant undertaking. The town in this deal, the town would not be paying for any of the pipe removals, excavating, installation of the pipe, all the restoration, all that type of stuff. The town wouldn't have to bear any costs. As far as the timing, the timing of this project fits well. So it's not only very cost effective, but the timing actually meets construction schedules down there. It aligns well with site plan, and I was very, very pleased that both parties could come to these terms and recommend this approach to council for their consideration.
Thank you, Peter. Councillor Norrie?
I know nothing about this stuff, but I'm very impressed, and thank you, Peter. It makes a lot of sense from just building anything. So very good job. That's all I want to say.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Norrie. Yeah, Councillor Pennell and then Deputy Mayor Kaiser.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, Mayor, Peter, I just have a couple questions here. You mentioned in kind. On the staff report, we have an approximate cost of $125 or $125,000 for the pipe, and a further award of $10,000 to Dornicamp. What were they going to do for us in kind?
Through your worship, so basically there's two separate projects here. So the in-kind services that the majority of the work that they would provide would be on the water main installation side of it. So the only fee that we would pay there would be the design fees. So some of the things that are required to satisfy MOE approvals is we need PN stamp design drawings and as-built for those purposes. So the design costs are pretty reasonable in the grand scheme of things. Where the huge savings are for the town is the actual physical work that's being conducted. That's where the big savings are. And then when we look at the flip side on the design, so the other half of the project, so the design work for the actual river intake itself, $10,000 for engineering design for something of that scope is very reasonable.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship. If I may, then Peter, on the last page of the report, second paragraph down, I guess, or third paragraph, says that the raw water intake replacement will have the P engineering stamp drawings. I understand that, but then it also goes on that there'll be an estimate. So what are they going to be providing us an estimate for? So staff will provide a report in engineering construction if the project is feasible. But isn't that what we were just talking about, or am I missing something here?
So that portion of the project, through your worship, that portion of the project is linked to the actual head gate itself. I should have chose two different titles. It's a little bit misleading. Yeah. So the raw water main would get installed under the one proposal and the agreement for the in-kind work. The other side of the project is to do the design work and construction estimates for basically a new head wall there with operational gates. And so the design work would provide the construction cost estimates. We have had some verbal estimates that were provided to us, but that I wouldn't want to reiterate those numbers just because they were very, very reasonable. But until you do the engineering, that's where you'll find any of the variables that could be included in that project. So they'll engineer the headwork side of it. We'll bring that report back to council, see if you guys are in favor of supporting that project, if we have the cash flow and to support it. But the other one is the more time sensitive one, the pipe replacement, because that hinges on construction schedules and site plan approvals.
Okay. And just one last one. With the design of this, obviously the new pipe is going to be running across their property. There's going to be an easement. I understand that the pipe is 100 years plus and watertight. I just want to, I can understand there'll be an easement, it'll be on title, it'll be all that wonderful stuff, but I'm just wondering if they're planning on building anything on top of this pipe, where the easement's going to be.
So through your worship, so the development proposal is, the development will, as it's designed today, will go across the easement itself. There'll be nothing load bearing on the pipe itself. So although they do encroach across the easement, there's no risk to the in-ground infrastructure. The advantage to when the pipe is upgraded, you know, if there ever had to be any type of work done to it in the future with that new pipe, it could be done. With the pipe that's in there now, there's significant concerns with pipe elevations, with the invert elevations. So any kind of rehabilitation work would be very difficult and would warrant the need for large access vaults. So that would be very cumbersome and difficult to incorporate into their project, where the new pipe, and when I say 100 years, the true lifespan of that pipe material is unknown. There's lots of reports that say 200 and 300 years, like it's there for a long time. It basically will eliminate any of our concerns from an infrastructure point of view for a long time, few lifetimes.
Okay, thank you. My main concern is just with the construction and stuff. If, you know, things happen and as long as we can get to it to repair that piece that may break, then I'm satisfied. Thank you very much.
Deputy Mayor Kaiser, you had a question?
Well, partly comments and questions. So I think it's a pretty sweet deal. And I know Peter didn't go in that direction, but I would guesstimate that the actual cost of the in-kind work probably is greater than the cost of the pipe. And so it is a pretty sweet deal. We had approved intake rehabilitation or intake improvements, river intake improvements of about $100,000 in our budget. This is a whole new intake, but the design is being done by them. So then it's just the actual construction portion that we'd be looking at. But this is going to be probably a notable increase over improvements. It's to build a new one. Do you have any estimate at this time? I mean, I realize it's going to be a shot in the dark, or do you just want to stay away from that at this time?
Through your worship, so the construction estimate that was thrown out was without knowing a lot of variables, so I wouldn't want to repeat it. I think that'd be pretty. That wouldn't be wise of me to repeat the number. It's basically the line item that I presented to you back in December as part of the utilities budget was basically just to undertake the design work and put a few of the maybe some temporary repairs to get us in a position for future. So the scope of this work here is actually much larger than the original plan that was in that budget for 100,000. So it's a lot bigger bang for the buck today than we anticipated getting.
I did just want to add, if I may, that having Dornicamps, not only did they go through the procurement process and were successful, or they were deemed appropriate, but having the Dornicamps do the work in kind means they know exactly where everything is when they do their construction. I think it's a great fit and a great opportunity to have them partner with it in that sense, because if they were to go in there and try to put in pilings for this large structure they're going to be building, they might hit the pipe just because it's not exactly where they think it is or whatever. So I think this is a great opportunity that we have to take. I'm interested to see what that last piece of the puzzle will be, but I certainly approve going ahead with this because it does seem like quite a sweet deal. Thank you.
Okay, any further comments or questions? Okay, so you do have a recommendation that council receive for information, and further that council authorizes staff to execute an agreement on behalf of the corporation of the town of Greater Napanee with HR Dornicamp Construction for the installation of approximately 270 meters of raw water main at no cost to the town. And further that council approve the purchase of approximately 270 meters of PVC DR 25 600 millimeter water main and all related fittings and materials required for installation for the estimated sum of $125,000. And further, that council award the raw water intake replacement design proposal to HR Dornekamp Construction Limited for the sum of $10,000. And further, that council award the raw water line replacement design proposal to HR Dornekamp Construction Limited for the sum of $10,000. And further, that council accepts the procurement process undertaken by the municipal staff as having met the goals and principles of the municipal procurement policies forming part of the Town of Greater Napanee bylaw number 0505 as amended. Moved by Councillor McCormack, seconded by Councillor Richardson. Further comments or questions? All in favor of the motion? Motion is carried unanimously. Thank you. Infrastructure services, short-term accommodations. Who's speaking to this? Sorry, I haven't got them right in front of me. Is Michael on the line with us? Yep, there he is right there. Good evening, Michael.
I'm available for any questions. I believe the pertinent details and recommended steps are noted in the report. So if council has any questions, I'd be glad to address them.
Okay, thank you. Comments or questions, Deputy Mayor Kaiser?
This is exactly what I hoped to get out of what we asked for, which was just a timeline of what staff can accommodate under current situation and moving forward. And I think that if we get the ball rolling and move on it, and we have something in front of us by the early 2022, I think that's very reasonable. And this is all I wanted to know was what can we accommodate? What do we have the capacity for? Now we have a timeline set in front of us, and recognizing that timeline may fluctuate a little bit depending on how this phases roll out and roll back and roll forward and whatever. This is exactly what I was hoping to see. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Councillor Pennell, and then I'll get to you, Councillor McCormack.
Thank you, Worship. Through you, Michael, I thank you very much for the report, and it's a nice report. It tells us a great timeline. Although that I agree that this matter needs to be addressed, I don't agree that a project like this should be started during this emergency pandemic. We don't know how long it's going to take, and we're using up staff resources. It's wrong. It's wrong right now for the staff and the workload, and it's wrong for the budget. At the earliest, I would like to see us not even begin to work until at least Q1 of 2021. We're in a state of emergency here. And if you look at this, really basically Q4 in 2020 is just some gathering, and nothing's really going to be done till Q1 of 2021 anyway. And there needs to be public consultation going on here. And I think that's this project is a project that will need great consideration, lots of time put together. This, as you can see, with the timeframes that we have here, that it is a long drawn out, that's the wrong words. It's a thorough report, and it's going to take a lot of time. And I just think that is completely wrong to start a project like this when we're in this pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you. I think Councillor McCormack and then Councillor Norrie.
So this is not criticism, it's just questions. I have here with me Prince Edward County's bylaw addressing this. And my understanding is that Prince Edward County put this together in less than a year. So just if Michael could speak to this, has he or somebody from his staff spoken to Prince Edward County to get a feel as how they went through the process, notwithstanding the fact that we're under a pandemic and we have all these issues right now? Just a question on how they accomplished getting their bylaw put together in a short period of time. And it was due to the complaints that they had from many of the residents back in 2018, and this was put in place in 2019. So I'm just curious because I have the whole item in front of me and it's very involved and very specific. So just a question.
Through your worship, at this time, no discussion directly with Prince Edward County or with Prince Edward County relating to this particular project has taken place. However, I am aware that Prince Edward County did hire a third-party consultant, WSP, to help a lot with that undertaking. So I would assume a lot of the heavy lifting would have been done by WSP to reduce those timelines, but I can confirm that directly with PEC staff at a later date.
Councillor Norrie, did you have your hand up earlier? Yeah, you did. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, just briefly, sort of in the same line, I have the whole package here. And I don't think we have to reinvent the wheel, and we don't have to hire outside consultants. It's very simple. They did it in just over 6 months because we talked to the mayor. Actually, we were at that course together, your worship, with Terry when he said they didn't have anything done. And then 6 months later, they have it done. Can't we just look at that and not reinvent the wheel, not hire consultants, and just, when you have time, I understand it's a crazy time now, but these things can be scary too. So we have to get some controls, for cleaning and safety and all that. So can't you just, when someone has time, look at this package from Picton, because when I've read it twice and it's, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. That's all I'm going to say. That's just my only suggestion. I'm just a counselor. That's all.
Michael, did you wish to have an answer to that? Do we just want to copy their bylaw?
We can definitely use portions of it. I mean, we can take the regulations into consideration when we're reviewing and making recommendations for ours. The challenges with their regulatory framework is slightly different than ours, so it can't just be a complete copy paste. We'll have to take their provisions and modify to suit. However, we can use their zoning bylaw provisions, for example, as a template for us to use and tailor to suit for the town.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. And I think that we all agree that everybody right now, especially your section, I'll be with you there in just 1 second, Councillor Johnson. There's a lot of work now that the floodgates have opened in yours. But I'm sure that you'll come up with something, and it is important. And as Councillor Norrie said, even the health restrictions on some of these are going to be important after this pandemic. And I don't think that there's not an area around us that everybody's looking at it just because of the influx of people. So it seems to be okay when seasonals want to visit during this pandemic, but the short-term accommodations have been tough. It is part of our tourism, but I also think that it has to be controlled. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. You mentioned tourism, and that was one of the points that I wanted to bring up. I know some people have had challenges with properties that were not well run by their neighbors, and that has prompted a lot of this discussion. But we also have other people in this community who have already been running Airbnbs from a strong business point of view, and they haven't had those same problems. And since we don't have at this point yet a huge tourist market, it is something that we can use to develop as long as the program is handled properly and it's a good business model. The other thing that I wanted to mention was with COVID-19, I think you are going to see the regulations around this changing a lot in the next 6 months. So just jumping into it and copying what was posted pre-COVID-19 may not be as relevant afterwards. The people who are marketing the Airbnbs, especially on the website and looking for positive feedback, they may also be coming to us to say we have done inspections or something to confirm that their properties are safe for someone to go to. So we need to be prepared for that as well.
Okay.
So thank you for the document, Michael. It was well put together.
Anything further? So, sorry, Deputy Mayor Kaiser.
I wanted to sort of speak to what Councillor Pennell said earlier, and I do agree that we are in a state of emergency and we have to be cognizant of the staff needs. I also know that because of the state of emergency and the delays in development services, the delays in construction across the board, that as things start to ease and I mean, you guys are going to get slammed up there at 45 Commercial Court. In addition to having to manage that under new protocols and physical distancing and all that, what I would advocate for is initiating background work in-house only, just with the idea of having the wheels ready to roll when restrictions allow, when we can start thinking about having public meetings, when we start having a concept, because gathering this information and pulling things off the, Prince Edward County's website, et cetera, this is stuff that can fit in and around. And, I see this as sort of a day filler type of project for the coming months. And I'm not advocating that we set a date that we begin at any time at this point, but just to have the background work done in-house so that, as time permits and when you're ready and when the restrictions start to ease and normalcy starts to happen, that we can start to move on this and not have it initiate completely solely later, but do like that first box in your chart here, the information gathering steps. That's all I would advocate for at this time, and then be ready so that as restrictions ease, then we start rolling on it. That was my concept.
Okay, anything further? Now, you do have a recommendation before, oh, sorry, Councillor Richardson? Whether you were voting or talking.
Well, I could do either. I don't want to beat this to death, but I think we got to forge ahead with this, get this thing rolling. I think it's a very generous timeline that we're looking at. I think it's taken into account everything that lies ahead of us with respect to the COVID. So I do think we do have to forge ahead with this. Again, the timelines I think are being very generous. So let's move forward with it. I know things are going to change in the next 2 years, and by 2022, I'm sure things are going to be completely different again, but I think we got to move forward with it. So that's all I really wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm sure too that if it becomes overwhelming for staff, or if we slip back into this pandemic and it changes timelines, that I'm sure that GMs and staff directors are not going to be shy to come back and just say, there's only so much I can do. So you have a recommendation that you receive for information and development services, short-term accommodations update report, and further that council direct staff to commence the proposed process as outlined in the report. Moved by Councillor McCormack, seconded by Councillor Norrie. Further comments or questions? Yes, comment or question there, Deputy Mayor Kaiser?
Only, as I said before, I was only really advocating to initiate the background work. I might leave all of the deliverable dates off because, as Richardson just said, we might step in, step out of this. We have a generous timeline. We know it's fluid, but maybe it's even reasonable to just sort of leave a lot of it off. Certainly, second box down, just leave them blank for now. We know that it's a year-plus process when the wheels can roll. That's my suggestion, just a friend.
Councillor Richardson.
Sorry, Your Worship, I don't want to beleaguer this anymore.
No, go ahead.
I come from a world where timelines aren't necessarily a bad thing, and we're not going to give anybody trouble if they don't meet the timelines, but I do believe that we do have to have timelines. I'm just a little reluctant to not have timelines. If something happens in the future and things go sideways, I don't think there's anybody sitting on this on these screens tonight that wouldn't understand that. Yeah, you know what, we have to prioritize. That's what life is all about. So, but I do think we do have to strive forward to some type of timelines. That's all. So sorry, and I promise I won't be lingering it anymore.
No, it was a good statement. So I have a motion by Councillor McCormack. I have a seconder. Was who? Councillor Richardson? Were you the seconder? Who was the seconder? Oh, Councillor Norrie.
Norrie.
Yeah. Further comments or questions? All in favor of the motion? Motion is carried. Oh, sorry, opposed? Okay, with one opposed, please. Thank you. Oh, here we go. Community and Corporate Services, assumption of Riverside and Riverview cemeteries. Mr. Zatterberg.
Here I come. Outside of the report that you have before you, just a couple updates. Not making any promises to professionals in the field. I have been having multiple conversations with various types of companies and operators that are currently in the market. As I said, I'm not making any promises. I'm just trying to gather information. And not making promises. Riverview Cemetery was cut today. I know I'm jumping ahead of us here, but if the weather this week is grass growing season, so I thought we needed to move quickly. And Riverside, which is in the east, well, that grass cutting will start on Thursday, but that's 25 acres, so that's a fairly large project. That's in addition to what you see in the report.
Thank you. Comments or questions for Mr. Zatterberg? Yeah, Councillor Norrie, and then Councillor Pennell.
Yes, Grant, I know when I first got elected, we did some stuff with the cemeteries when the first situation happened and it ended. Do we have, and this is nothing negative, do we have the paperwork where the bodies are and the money from the last group? I mean, I can give you his name, but everybody knows it. Or are we still looking to get that so we know what's going on for the families that have bought plots and everything? You know, that's all.
The paperwork or the records are all in my office right now.
Oh, great.
One of our staff members is going through doing an inventory, trying to find which papers are absolutely necessary. And then again, in consultation with the people who work in the industry, we're working on which ones they will need to move forward. For example, on Monday coming, there is going to be an interment in one of the cemeteries. So we'll have to start working on where those details are.
Thank you. And again, like I said, I'm willing to help out, but that's great. So you're on top of everything, and any help you need, you have it.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. I thought I saw another hand up. Councillor Pennell?
Thank you, Worship. Grant, if we go ahead with this, which reading a report, we don't have any choice in going with this, what kind of a time frame are we looking at having this all transferred over if this gets signed tonight?
I don't have a specific answer for you. I do know that for the most part, Riverside, which is in the east, sorry, the lots, the PIN numbers, that should be a fairly easy process. Again, that's the one that's 25 acres. There's been some work done on that in the past. Riverview is another story where there's not clear ownership or deeds on all. There's more than one parcel there, even though it's only 6 acres. So that one could take a little bit more time. So I don't have an answer for you, but so in the meantime, so right, so there's the land transfer side, then it's our moral or ethical duty. How far do we go when we don't know what our legal standing is in the meantime? There's a big gray area that we're trying to work through.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Kaiser.
We've talked a lot about this, and I know senior management's talked a lot about this. I know there's been talk between Mr. Zatterberg and the Bereavement Association of Ontario, whatever it's called. Do we have at this time even so much as a concept that we might discuss as to what might? I'm getting calls and people are asking, the news is there, the change in responsibility and ownership and what have you. People want to know what's going to happen, where it's going to be in the future, who's going to be involved, how they might be involved. And do we have even so much as a concept we might float or a timeline that we might have a concept start building a framework around that may or may not involve the public, what staff, what contractors, and not naming names, but just that concept.
We do, through worship. So first thing tomorrow, we will be putting out on social media and the newspaper ads on the fact that there is new management. We're going to be asking for people's patience as we move through this. We also have updated our volunteer registration page so that people can start to volunteer to work in one or both of the cemeteries. We really haven't had an opportunity to figure out exactly what the structure of this will look like. However, I will probably be bringing back a recommendation to council that we have some kind of transition team in place with working with the professionals that live within our own community or close by, that will give recommendations on what the governance of this will look like moving forward. I don't have an answer for you, but there's a couple of, well, 2 or 3 different models that we could be working towards, and come back with recommendations to you on those.
If I could just follow up of the comments I've had and heard, I think most people are pleased that the situation is evolving from where it was, and they're willing to be patient, knowing that it's got to get better. I think that's the simplest way to say it.
Anything further? Certainly, I'll just comment on it. I mean, to start a Monday morning with a phone call that we may be owning 2 cemeteries very, very quickly within this whole pandemic that we're in wasn't the best news, but it's been a long time coming. This has been a struggle for council ever since I've been on council. And I think that we're moving in the right direction. I know Mr. Zetterberg is going to look at how managing these things has evolved, sometimes just as a business, sometimes as a combination business and volunteer base, or strictly volunteer base. And I think we have to be very careful that we choose the right one. It'll be nice to get the perpetual funds, whether we can get them and invest them ourselves, and that's a whole other thing. But this isn't something just for the general public that we walked out and asked for. We have supported it through taxpayers' dollars for quite some time, and not in the past 2 years. But this gives us a commitment that we can move forward, and it's not any different from what many other municipalities are facing. So you have a recommendation that council receive for information, the Community and Corporate Report regarding the town's assumption of Riverside Cemetery and Riverview Cemetery at the request of the Board of Directors of the Napanee Cemetery Company, and through regulations stipulated under the Funeral, Burial, and Cremation Act, Services Act 2002, and Ontario Regulation 30-11. And further, that council directs staff to continue to consult with local and regional burial industry sector operators and prepare a management plan for active cemeteries under the town's jurisdiction. And further, that council authorize the mayor and the town clerk to execute all necessary documents on behalf of the town for the transfer of Riverside Cemetery and Riverview Cemetery assets, physical, intellectual, and financial, to the municipalities. Moved by Deputy Mayor Kaiser, seconded by Councillor Pennell. Any further comments or questions? All in favor of the motion? Motion is carried unanimously. Thank you. Community and Corporate Services, leasing opportunity for town-owned property. Mr. Zetterberg, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, if you noticed in Michael Nob's earlier report, he said that the report speaks for itself. I recognize that this report is very, I don't know how to call, I don't know exact words for it, but it's very light on detail. And I just want to say to you that this is not the normal way to bring this type of thing forward. However, we're in circumstances right now where it's not normal activity. And normally I would have more detail before you in a different manner. And so I recognize that you're going to have some questions around this, and that it's going to be a little bit uncomfortable to make some decisions without more detail.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor McCormack and then Councillor Pennell.
Is the property in question something that's currently for sale with a for sale sign on it?
No, it is something that was surplus, but so anything on the surplus list was authorized for sale by this council.
Okay, Councillor McCormack, do you have another follow-up? Yeah.
Just so, if it's authorized by council to be sold, but there's no for sale sign, so what's going on then? I mean, if we have this property for sale, there's no for sale sign. How do we pass this on that it's available for sale?
Right, so in an earlier meeting, council authorized an RFQ for real estate services. That RFQ has not gone out yet. It's in the queue to go out, but it is not out yet. And then there's another element that this property has some encroachment issues on it that we have to clear before it's listed. But it's definitely one that has come up in the past. I guess the long story of it is that we don't have real estate services. That process has not been completed yet.
Okay, Councillor Pennell.
Thank you, Worship. So yeah, just with that being said, just follow up on that. It's scheduled to be listed for sale, but it's not up for sale as of yet. I just have more statements probably in regard to this than questions, but I do have some questions for you, Brent, as well. One of the statements I like to make is from time to time, this is not uncommon in the real estate world to have a tenant not be identified, but there is some due diligence that need to be done. The reasons for tenants or buyers not to be identified until a later date can vary from anything to disgruntled neighbors or to people just want privacy in their business, or it could be a brand new startup business and people don't want to know what they're up to. So I have just a question, Brent. So these tenants, they are local or are they out of town?
They're local.
They're local, okay. I see in the report that tenants would be able to make improvements to the property. That is a little scary at times because maybe there's a new door that shouldn't have been where it is or stuff like that. So I would just like to add to this and any documentations that go out that any improvements be approved by the town at the cost of the tenant, and that any permits required will be applied for. And when I mention approved by the town, I'm not necessarily saying that, you know, a building permit, because of course that would have to be done. But I mean that it physically doesn't take away from the building. I'd also like to assure that the tenants are aware that the town may be using a real estate professional to list the property during the one-year lease, and the tenants would cooperate in letting the real estate and the potential buyers to view the property while listed. And I say that that may happen because who knows if we're going to have this thing up and listed in that one-year term. It's quite important that we have clarity through these people that they know that this property is going to be listed and it's going to be for sale. I'd also like to point out to everybody on here that there is some people that don't recognize that using a real estate professional is the most common and transparent way to dispose of surplus property. And that by using a real estate professional to list a property shall not be myself, Dave Pennell Jr. I'm still hearing from the backsides that the town is using myself as a real estate agent, and that is not true. I want that to be I want that out there tonight because, well, when I chose to become a counselor, I knew that that part was not going to be available to me. And that is what I have to say about that. Thank you.
Did you wish to speak, Brant?
I just wanted to make another comment about this, is that the unorthodox manner in which this is brought forward is that basically I'm asking council to authorize me to have further conversations with this business, but also to recognize that the opposite of this is also true, that if at the end of all this process, you found out that I was approached by business and chose to do nothing, that would also have been a problem for you, because they were looking for a conversation, and I could not have a further conversation with them without coming and speaking to you, even in this manner.
Councillor Richardson, did you have your hand up? Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I want to thank Mr. Zatterberg for the work he's done on this. I'm just going to keep it very quite easy, quite simple. There really just isn't enough information for me to make an informed decision on this. There really isn't, and that's the crux of the matter. And I appreciate, I have all the faith in the world of Mr. Zatterberg to deal with this in the appropriate way. There just isn't enough information, and maybe in the not too distant future, we can have a forum in which we can have a candid conversation about this in order to make that informed decision. I just don't think tonight is the night, and it's just difficult to make that decision when we don't know the who's, what's, where's, when's, and why's. That's just my personal opinion on that. So,
Deputy Mayor Kaiser.
I have a question for Brant, and then sort of an opinion, I guess, will express. And my question is, in the staff recommendation, the third point is council directs staff to report back should a one-year lease be signed. Would that, are you intending that we would know prior to the signing, so we would know what the negotiation resulted in prior to the signing? Or is it that you're going to have a conversation, potentially reach an outcome, potentially sign it, and then we'll know about it after the fact? I just want clarification on that.
Right, and a lot of it depends on what state our council meetings are in at that point. What information can come forward in an open session or in a public session. What portions of an agreement such as this could be stated in a public forum. So there would have to be some legal advice given to me on how I bring things forward.
So, I mean, at county, we were able to conduct a Zoom meeting as a closed meeting without YouTube access, and it was invite only. So I think we could, if we needed to, have a closed session item for this. We would just schedule that meeting prior to the regular or whatever. I got to tell you up front, and I guess this is where I get into my opinion part. I'm a little uneasy about the optics of this, just from the sense that we've had other situations come forward where the real estate deal, if you will, was initiated by the outside party, and it didn't go through a normal, open, transparent process. This is a little different because it's not a purchase, it's a lease. We're talking about somebody renting a space for 1 year. That's all they want to commit to. And it's all we'd be committed to. And the building could still be up for sale. I'm believing that the building is currently vacant. And so there's no favoritism or anything in that sense. We didn't create a space or create a vacancy. The vacancy was there. I mean, it is an unprecedented and unconventional time. I'm okay with the idea of directing Brant Zatterberg to continue conversations to get more understanding, that we could have at the very least a closed item, if not an open item, to discuss it further prior to the signing. I guess that's what I would like to know, is that we can have the conversation, get some understanding, but before any deal is signed, and to make sure that things like what Councilor Fennell raised are covered off and anything else. Thank you.
Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with what Deputy Mayor Kaiser was saying. I think we need more information. Are we able, though, to have an in-camera Zoom meeting? So at this point, we could give Brant permission to go ahead and get a preliminary document signed pending council approval at an in-camera council meeting. Do we have the ability to do that?
Well, I think maybe I could answer that one. I don't think we could have anything signed at this point. I think we could have something come back, but I'm going to ask a question here. Normally, when we are looking for a tenant, does it come forward to council? Normally, when somebody is looking to lease, to rent one of our facilities, whether it's a building, whether it's part of the SPC, do those, and I know you don't usually do these, Mr. McDonald does, but do those come back to us for approval?
You're definitely made aware of the final agreement. The difference in this case is that this is not a lease in a building that we would normally be leasing out. This is in a building that you authorized me to sell. And this is a change of course for 1 year. So that's why it was important for me to bring it back to you, because I already have instructions from you of what to do with the building. And this is basically stalling the sale of the building for at least 1 year, given the circumstances of basically COVID release or relief for this business.
And sorry, go ahead, Councillor Johnson.
Sorry, Mayor, I think you misunderstood. I didn't mean to sign the lease in entirety. I was sort of thinking more of a letter of an intent to sign that needs to be approved by council.
Yeah, no, thank you. You know, this is a real predicament, and I feel badly that it's had to come forward to us in this manner. You know, it's a business that obviously needs to have a place to operate from. But I agree with all of council is that we do need to have more information, because we do need to be for our taxpayers and ratepayers. We need to be transparent. It's not anything that's trying to be underhanded. It's trying to support a business during these crazy times when there are other supports out there, if people would look at them. So, council, your wishes, please. Deputy Mayor Kaiser.
I would move that we direct staff to continue discussions to reach a better understanding. That possibly we would have a closed item even prior to a final negotiation, but at the very least that we would have a discussion prior to any signing. So continue discussion, possibly negotiate. If information comes to such a point that we need to have a discussion before they continue, maybe we get in again once more before we even get to a potential or draft agreement. But definitely we have to have a final discussion prior to any signing.
So you're making that by way of motion, and your wording would be?
Well, the first receive, direct staff to continue discussion for information gathering, and potentially negotiate an agreement, but no signing. And then the council would also direct staff to report back prior to any signing. I think that's clear enough.
I have a seconder for that motion. Councillor Johnson is seconding it. Councillor Pennell, you had your hand up to say something.
I did, yes, thank you, Your Worship. I was going to second it so we could open up some more conversation in regards to this. I think when we read through this and we read through the lines that whoever the tenant is going to be, they want to remain anonymous, so that any reports that are going to be brought back to us, I feel that if these people want to continue to work with us, that we're not going to know who they are. And that obviously Mr. Zetterberg knows who they are, and they're entrusting him and keeping it amongst himself. I think that if we go any further, we have to put some trust into him to bring us back something a draft lease or something, and then we all sign a confidentiality agreement or something, just in case it doesn't go through, or whatever the case may be. I just want to put the rest. I don't have a problem doing that, because I do deal with it, not on a daily basis, but I do deal with it quite frequently in my business. But I can see where the rest of the council might have some issues with this. But if these people are willing to work with us, they have a legal business. It's not something that they're going to be breaking the law with. They don't go in there and tear down the building. I think we need to put some trust in our staff as well, and allow them to work out what a lease would look like, what kind of a pricing, what kind of a term. And obviously inside that lease, they would know that this building is coming up for sale.
Anything further from Councillor McCormack?
Can we not schedule a video closed session to deal with this
Yes, we can.
in the next few days?
Yes, we can. Oh, sorry. I'm saying that. Mr. Cowrie may be saying that we can't, but I think we can figure out a way to do it.
Not certainly, Madam Mayor, not saying you can't. The current procedural bylaw you passed for virtual meetings excluded virtual meetings for the purpose of closed session. That was in the procedural bylaw. You'd have to waive that portion of your procedural bylaw, and then we could look at a meeting should you wish in that manner.
Yeah, and certainly it would be council's wishes. I guess the bad thing about this is here we are trying to be as open and transparent as we can, no matter what the papers and everything else will say tomorrow. But we're trying to save a business. We're trying to do something that's right. And within this pandemic, it just makes it so difficult. And could we have taken this and just let it ride? No, because that's not the way that this council wants to operate. So we do have a motion on the floor. I will leave Councillor McCormack's statement about a closed session for the time being. Let's vote on the first motion unless somebody else has something to say on it. Councillor Richardson and then Councillor Pennell.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. It is a tricky situation, and I'll be the first one to admit to that. But I personally would like to have a wholesome conversation about this before. I just don't want to offer up any kind of faint hope to these folks that we can make this happen, but we need some more information. I would sooner have a wholesome conversation with each other to say, what's this all about? Can we make this work? And should we make this work before we actually proceed to offering up a possibility? I just feel bad that if we instruct Mr. Zetterberg to have further conversations and they come to something that's probably a very amicable situation, and then it comes back to us and we say, geez, this isn't really the right fit. I just feel that maybe we should have that wholesome conversation first.
No, I don't disagree, Councillor Richardson. And we'll be banged about for trying to do something that's right and do it as openly and transparently. I can almost read the papers tomorrow myself. So we do have a motion, but it could, if a friendly amendment is that we do go into a closed session very quickly. Not tonight. We can't do it by procedural bylaw tonight, or I'd need a little help on that, Susan. Sorry, Deputy Mayor Kaiser.
Well, I would propose, if a friendly amendment's being offered, I would propose that I amend my original motion to say that we direct staff to further converse with the business. And that we also direct staff to report back prior to offering even a draft lease, so that we have the understanding. And then at that point in time, half staff would offer us what a draft lease might look like that they might offer the business, but it hasn't been offered yet at that point. Would that be better?
Seconder, would you be agreeable to that? Yes. Councillor Richardson, did you wish to speak?
Yeah, sorry, Your Worship, I didn't know whether I was supposed to or not, but yeah, I mean, I would feel bad. I just don't want to offer up any kind of fake hope to anybody.
Thank you.
And if we have further information before we make any kind of offer, I would feel better, and I think it would be far more fair to the people that are involved and in the community itself, that we have a far better understanding of what's going to happen here before we get into any kind of negotiations with them.
Okay, so that would mean then Deputy Mayor Kaiser and Councillor Johnson, that there would be no further contact until we were able to amend our procedural bylaw while under the declaration of emergency, to hold a closed session meeting for the purpose of just getting the advice for setting up a lease. And Susan, is that a reason that we could go into? I guess it's not to do with getting rid of property. Susan, I don't want to lead us down the garden path here and then find out that we can't hold a closed session on this to give council more information. I need your help, please.
So through you, Your Worship, yes, the procedure bylaw does not allow currently for closed meetings, as the CAO has indicated.
Yes.
So there would need to be a waiving of that portion of the procedure bylaw.
Okay.
With respect to going into closed session, there is a section in the Act that talks about, says a trade secret or scientific, technical, commercial, financial, or labor relations information supplied in confidence to the municipality, which if disclosed could reasonably be expected to prejudice or significantly the competitive position or interfere significantly with the contractual or negotiations of a person, group, or organization.
So from that, then we would be within our ability, not stretching the truth, not doing anything. We would have the ability to go into a closed session for giving council a fulsome explanation of what's going on.
Yes, or if there was legal guidance needed as well, that would be another reason.
Okay. Councillor Pennell and then Councillor Johnson.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. I just have a question for Brant. What's the time sensitivity like on this? Has the proposed tenants talked to you in regard to what their timeline is? Because this will help us be able to set up this in-camera meeting.
I'm a little leery of answering at the question specifically because I might be revealing something that is known between the two parties, right? I am hoping, if I have a conversation tomorrow, that the June 9th date to bring something to council would not be too late for them. And then if my understanding is there's going to be another meeting on June 16th. So those two meetings together, I'm hoping will fit the timeline so that they can make plans for their business.
Okay, that's great. So we're not under the pressure to have this done tomorrow or anything like that. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, council, do we have, sorry, Councillor Johnson?
Thank you, Mayor. My question was for Susan. What sort of timeline do we need to set up an in-camera meeting?
Through the Worship, council would need to amend or waive the section of the procedure bylaw prior to holding a closed session meeting.
Okay.
When do we have to do that? Sorry, do we have to do that at tonight's meeting so that we can set up another meeting, or does that have to wait until the June 9th meeting?
Go ahead, Susan.
You could give staff direction tonight if you wanted for an amendment to that bylaw, and we could bring it forward to the June 9th meeting.
Okay, so we have a motion on the books right now. That is to, where did the motion go from here? Sorry. Deputy Mayor Kaiser, your motion.
Motion to receive,
Yeah.
motion for staff to continue conversation, motion for staff to report back prior to offering even a draft lease.
Okay. Seconder, you're good with that? That was Councillor Johnson. Okay. Any further comments or questions? All in favor of that motion? So I've got 1, 2, 3 opposed. 1, 2, 3. I break the tie, so it will be carried. Confusing as hell.
Do you want a motion at this time to look at the procedural bylaw to allow for closed session Zoom meetings?
Yes, please. Do you want to make that motion?
I do.
Okay, seconded by Councillor Pennell. All in favor of that motion? Motion is carried. Thank you, Council. That was, that's a toughie. I know that you all know that the reason is to try and do the right thing, but it's hard to find a way to do it without spewing out all kinds of stuff. 5.9, draft correspondence from Ian Monroe to the Minister, Jeff Urick, Minister of the Environment, Conservation and Parks, restatus of waste management. Now, you do have the original letter that Mr. Monroe had put out to us. Have you read it? What's your idea of me co-signing it? I do have a draft letter here, and I'm being asked to sign it. It is being CC'd to Chief Markle, Reeve Phillips, Daryl Cramp, and the rest of them. Yet no other head of council is being asked to sign it. Deputy Mayor Kaiser, and then Councillor Pennell.
Thank you, Your Worship. I first want to say thank you to Ian and the CCCTE for their continuous vigilance on this all the way along. They've really stepped up and been our community representatives on this, unofficially, but they've done it. Having said that, I don't have a problem with the letter, except I'm a little unsure and a little uncomfortable with request number 4 to compensate for costs. I don't think that's necessarily our argument to make. But outside of that, I don't have a problem with you supporting the letter as it is. That's all I want to say.
Any other comments? Councillor Pennell?
Thank you, Worship. I just have some notes here. Although I agree with most parts of the letter, and I certainly agree with Deputy Mayor Kaiser, that's the ongoing work that is being done into this is refreshing, because we definitely don't want something like this to fall onto the wayside. I do have a little bit of an issue of somebody writing the letter and then asking us to sign it. If we're going to write a letter like this, I'd like to see it come from us. I too have in my notes that number 4 is definitely a concern for me, especially when we don't know what these costs are, and we're asking for costs for a different committee that's not a committee of council to recuperate the cost. The other thing, we just went through this, and the last one was there's a lot of unknowns here. If you look at the Richmond landfill Breck letter that was attached, there's a lot of click here to read more, and of course I don't have that information. I can't click anywhere to get that. So those are all of my points that I do have a little bit of an issue asking you to sign this However, I do like what the continued work is, and we do need to stay on top of this. So I would like to see this possibly done in a different manner.
Yep, Deputy Mayor Kaiser.
Sorry, I just wanted to add, if I may, based on what Councillor Purnell just said, in the last term of council, we actually forwarded about, I'm stretching my memory, but I think it was $10,000 that we gave to this organization to help out some of the costs. And at the time, I had an understanding, or my recollection is that they had carried about $60,000 in total in costs at that point, and had only fundraised to the tune of about 30. So I think that's the kind of number we're looking at here, $1,000 in outstanding balance, unless something's added to that in the last 2 or 3 years. I just wanted to throw that out there for understanding. And the logic at the time for the funds that we gave them was that we had a short spend in our engineering, if you will, for the year. And so we had a bit of a surplus that year. They had requested it. I thought, you know, they've done a lot of work on our behalf, on the behalf of the greater community, and it was appropriate. I think, I don't know if I was a mover in that one, but I was certainly involved in it.
Okay. Well, actually, we have prepared a draft, which I'd like you to take the time. We've got to watch the time here because it's 9:50, so Susan may come on and tell me that we have to extend this meeting. But addressed to the Honorable Jeff Urick, the Town of Greater Napanee Council and staff continue to hear regularly from area citizens, including members of the Concerned Citizens Committee of Tyendinaga and the Environs, in relation to the ongoing waste management landfill site. The town receives regular monitoring reports, and information is circulated by Waste Management to an outdated Community Liaison Committee, where council's listed representative has now been off council for over 6 years. In fact, some confusion was caused when our acting manager of environmental compliance was being emailed at his former public health employer's address. My community is in the middle of managing our pandemic response, the temporary closure of our largest employer, Goodyear Canada, until today, from the economic slowdown and a possible Lake Ontario flood response. At such time, we would prefer not to assign resources to a local landfill management and expansion file that has spanned 20 years. Questions remain on the real impact of leachate on local groundwater, the notification process used when changes are made to monitoring or new issues arise, and to the open-ended process relating to an expansion that never really goes away. I would simply ask at this time that the province is able, when the province is able to lift current emergency orders, that a meeting is scheduled between our offices. I would appreciate such a meeting, even if it has to be scheduled by virtual means. My council is very interested in understanding the ministry's plans to clearly understand any zones of environmental impact and what mitigation measures Waste Management will need to implement. Lack of clarity in these matters does not alleviate the frustration for residents, Waste Management, your ministry staff, or my community. Finally, my council seeks some understanding on how everyone can reach some finality of this question of future uses of this site. The continued talk of expansion only prolongs 20 years of painful and costly debate, while a future end use that would benefit the town of Greater Napanee and the province of Ontario remains unsettled. I look forward to cooperative efforts to resolve this situation and a productive conversation between us when the current pandemic is under a little better containment. So that's something that we probably should have done 2 or 3 terms again. It's sort of whatever, or get off the pot. It's time that they made a decision and spoke to us face to face and did this. And I believe that if we send it on our own, not that we're not supporting the concerned citizens and theirs, but we're the host of this, and I think we need to play some hardball. Let's get it stopped. Councillor Purnell.
Thank you, Worship. I'd like to make a motion that we we move on your letter, that you sign that in support and send that through to the appropriate people.
All right, and I'll make sure that you all get a copy of it, and I'll make sure that the copy is put out so that the public can see it within our next minutes too. Seconded by Deputy Mayor Kaiser. Comments or questions? We'll finally maybe put this thing to rest. Okay, all in favor of the motion? Motion is carried unanimously. Statements by members. Any statements by members? Oh, Deputy Mayor Kaiser. And then Councilor Nora, you had your hand up too? Yeah.
I'll just go quickly. I just wanted to, once again, thank you, Your Worship, for your tireless work throughout this emergency declaration. Your willingness to be open and sharing. There was a point earlier about the declaration of emergency. Yes, as a mayor, you have the authority to do that, but you didn't just do that. You actually consulted with all of council. You've been talking to council every week. I think you've really struck a very good balance between your emergency authorities and yet seeking to involve council at every step. And you know, this emergency management meeting that we sat in on at the start of this term, our training scenario was an earthquake. As we heard early on, that was a 2 or 3 day, maybe a long event. Nobody prepared any of us for this. And I can't say enough about senior staff and you yourself and how everybody around this has managed it. So I just wanted to say that as a shout out. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I certainly don't do it alone. And I certainly hope we never have to do it again. And I also certainly appreciate all of council's concerns about the way that it's gone. And we'll have that conversation another day. Councilor Norrie.
Yeah, it's just 2 shout outs. One, I've had a lot of issues with trees coming down in our neighborhood, having to cut them down. And I had a lot of complaints, and I have to shout out to Wayne Taylor. He has been awesome. One of our staff who's just talked to everybody. He's an arborist. He has calmed people down who think they know about trees. He's gone above and beyond. So I just want to make sure that senior staff knows that he has been working his ass off, really making my job easier. So thank you, Wayne. And secondly, the fire department, what they're doing with those birthday parties. I saw one around the corner the other day, and then when they left, there were some kids on the street. They stopped, hit the sirens. Shout out to our fire department for making the town happy. Thank you very much. That's my 2 things.
Thanks, Councilor. Any further comments? Councilor McCormack.
I've got about 4% left on my iPad before it quits. So if you see me disappear, you'll know why.
It isn't that you have to go home early. Okay, and I thank you all for all you've done too, and we've got to get by with the 4%. And I also thank staff. I know that even the questionnaires that have been sent out have been not really upsetting. And I also, a suggestion that I might make is we need to get our committees up and going again. And I hope that, I know that Councillor Norrie has been in constant communication with the BIA. I think that if you could just reach out with an email to say, you know, we're still here, we're going to get back together. Could be a lot of shifting as to the things that they do, but those are a lot of good volunteers that we've got out there. Okay, confirmation bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Corporation of the Town of Greater Napanee at a special session held May 19th, 2020. Moved by, first second, Deputy Mayor Kaiser, Councillor Norrie. All in favor of that motion? Motion is carried unanimously. Motion for adjournment. We're going to make it under 10 o'clock. Yeah, Deputy Mayor Kaiser, Councillor Richardson. All in favor of that motion? Motion is carried. Safe home, everybody. Thanks very much for all your work.
Safe home.